workshop on the American Rescue Plan Act in accordance with Section 3 of the Michigan Open Meetings Act. The clerk will note for the record this meeting is being conducted remotely via Zoom pursuant to a local declaration of emergency adopted by the Board of Commissioners on March 18th, 2020 and extended on October 15th, 2020. All members are attending remotely and with video activated. During the roll call, each member will indicate if they are currently located in Calhoun County, or if not, the county, city, village, or township in the state from which they are attending this meeting. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Kathy Sue Petty.
Sorry, Susan, here.
You're in Battle Creek.
Oh, yes, I am. Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, honey.
Commissioner Rochelle Hatcher.
Present here in Battle Creek, Michigan, District 2.
Commissioner Jake Smith.
Present from the soggy La Vista Boulevard in Battle Creek.
Commissioner Steve Frisbee.
Present in Battle Creek.
Commissioner Derek King.
Present.
Commissioner Tommy Miller.
You're muted, Commissioner Miller. He is present online. He's not responding. He's muted currently, so we'll note him here.
Commissioner Gary Tompkins.
Present from Homer Township, and absolutely the need why we need high-speed internet. This is crazy this morning. Sorry.
Have quorum.
Thank you. For a moment of silence, Commissioner Tompkins will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the May 28th, 2021 Board of Commissioners Special Workshop on the American Rescue Plan Act as presented?
Support,
Betty.
support Hatcher.
Betty and Hatcher, is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Petty.
Oops, I'm sorry. We can do a voice vote on this one. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right. Trying to get a hold of Commissioner Miller. Special order of business. We're going to start off with an overview from Kelly Scott and Megan Banning. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the commissioners for getting together this morning and agreeing to spend your morning giving some valuable input on really this, I don't know, unprecedented is overused, but really that's the word for this one-time funding that the federal government has allocated to counties. And so we're happy to also welcome several guest speakers today. Tried to create an agenda where we'll explain the current terms of the American Rescue Plan Act as it relates to aid to local governments. And then we'll look at some data specifically around Calhoun County households. And then starting at hopefully around 10 o'clock, we're going to try to stay on schedule. We've got an hour's worth of presentations from some of the larger funding investment opportunities that really fit well within the guidelines set forth by U.S. Treasury. So that's the agenda for today. And I am going to share my screen for the presentation that Megan and I will start with on an overview and the initial strategy that we have come up with just to give the commissioners an idea of, I guess, some things to spark your thoughts as well. So let me try to share my screen. And so first, we'll turn it over to Megan Banning, our Deputy Controller.
Good morning. So Kelly just wanted me to do just kind of a basic overview of the American Rescue Plan Act, or otherwise known as ARPA. It was signed into law March 11th of this year. The distributions included in the act are for various needs in response to the pandemic. But the ones that we're talking about specifically today are actually the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, or the CLFRF funds. And the total amount for that was $350 billion within the American Rescue Plan Act. Of that $350 billion, $10.1 billion is coming to the state of Michigan, and that amount is split between state, counties, and cities. And of that $10.1 billion, we, as the county proper, are getting $26 million to, like, specifically to Calhoun County. That distribution is allocated within 2 tranches. 50% of it was received on May 20th of this year. So just a few days ago, I guess. And then our second 50% has to be distributed to us within 365 days of that first distribution. So the expectation is that we'll get the second half of that distribution next May. And the basic guidelines between, or that govern these funds, is that you can cover costs starting back to March of 2021, because that's when it was signed into the act, with the exception of the revenue replacement funds. And funds must be obligated for use by the end of 2024. So next slide. So the overreaching eligible use categories, there are 4 of them. The first one is COVID-19 and negative economic impacts, and that's around the county or within the county, or government, local government in which you reside. So for us, that would be Calhoun County. Those uses are similar to the CARES Act funding. So it's basic just response to COVID-19. The next one is government services to the extent of lost revenue. So this is kind of the big one that people have been talking about in regards to being able to, for lack of a better word, kind of backfill lost revenues from 2020 through the end of 2023. So we've done a calculation on 2020 lost revenues. We can recalculate at the end of 21, 22, and 23 in order to kind of fill that gap of revenues that we lost due to the pandemic. And then the next category is essential worker premium pay, and that is not exclusive to county government members or workers. It can be for all kinds of employees throughout the county. And then the last eligible use category is investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. And we're going to touch on all 4 of those eligible use categories further on in the presentation. Specific things that are not allowed: so extra contributions to pension funds to pay unfunded liabilities, so we can't just dump it into our MERS defined benefit plan. Deposits to reserve funds, we can't put it in a fund for use later on down the road. Debt service and legal settlements, and then general infrastructure, with the exception for all of those revenues that we calculate as lost revenues. Those funds become just a little bit more flexible. So I think that the next slide moves on to Kelly. So does anyone have any questions on just the general overreaching guidelines of the ARPA and the CLFRF? Perfect.
Thank you, Megan. So yes, I'll elaborate a little bit more on each of those 4 allowable uses, and again, just some initial thoughts and strategies put together over the last few weeks, really since we got the guidance from Treasury. Just want to reiterate, we're not expecting the board to take any action today. We did build in citizens' time for public comment after the presentation, so people can have an opportunity to hear the topics of discussion and then comment. And then we do want to make time at the end for the Board of Commissioners to have open discussion after the presentations. So really the case to be made that the federal government treasury has posted for these funds is really that previously when we've had economic recessions, the thought was there was not sufficient federal and state aid, and that coupled with local revenue shortfalls at the local government level did not allow the economy to recover, at least as quickly as we would have hoped. So this is a different strategy. This aid goes to states, local, territorial, and tribal governments. And the intent is to help turn the tide on the pandemic. So as Megan mentioned, there's a big focus on continuing to respond to the negative impacts of the pandemic, but not just to get us back to where we were, to actually help fuel a stronger and an equitable economic recovery. So there's also a focus on looking at the hardest hit, looking at disparities in health that were exacerbated by the pandemic. And we know there's still a need to create more jobs. We still have not enough people in the labor force, and we still have unemployment that's not quite at pre-pandemic levels. So another case to be made is that the CARES Act, which was last year's stimulus funding, didn't have enough flexibility for local governments in discretion, particularly in trying to reimburse us for lost revenues. There were some specific rules that I think Treasury has said based on input from our state and national associations for local governments, that they listen to that and try to build into the ARPA funds a lot more discretion so that we can look at our local needs and again, focus on the industries and populations hardest hit in our individual areas. So because this is one-time funding, there are some guiding principles that we need to focus on. It would not be responsible to create new programs or ongoing budgetary costs. So adding long-term staff once the funding's gone in 3 years would not be fiscally responsible. There are millions of dollars that are also going to our other local governments, all of them within Calhoun County, all of the cities, townships, and villages, I should say, as well as school districts, community college. And so we're looking not to duplicate the efforts. We need to keep our eyes on what other local governments are doing. And we have had some of those conversations, and we have some meetings scheduled to do that coordination so that we're leveraging funds and not duplicating funding. There should be a focus on unmet needs. So for example, when we look at our capital improvement fund, we know that the county doesn't have ongoing funding for that. And we definitely have some unmet needs that one-time funding could really help with. I mentioned leveraging other funding sources, and that includes looking at, the ARPA package was 1.9 trillion. And so the local government direct allocations was just one portion of that. So we know there's the state of Michigan still has not decided what they're going to do. Their legislature has to appropriate all of their ARPA funds as well. I'm sure that some of those will turn into grant and appropriations for local governments. And so we want to watch the other funding sources and potentially partner with even the private sector to get the greatest impact out of these investments. If we wanted to do something like give out grants to individuals or businesses, I think that we should consider looking at programs that are already in place by other agencies, potentially our nonprofits, so that we don't have to add staff or hire consultants to administer, some large program that we're not equipped to administer. And then when we think about priorities for projects, we want those that are really going to make an impact. So we do want to hear about return on investment proposals and long-term success. So one-time funding needs to directly address the problems created by the pandemic. And it also, the solution needs to match that problem. And then finally, and I do think this is important as a public body, even if we can figure out how to fit some of our projects into the guidelines, we also need to be cognizant that, everyone is watching, and they should be. So how our spending choices will be explained and accepted by our taxpayers and investors. And by investors, I mean the people that invest in our bonds that we issue, bond rating agencies. So just keep that in mind, that we need to, be honest and upfront and feel good that we're doing the right thing with these dollars. So if I had to describe the top 5 priorities, these are pretty broad, and they are based on the interim guidance. The US Treasury put out an interim, they called it the interim final rule in the middle of May. I think it was May 10, and the requirement is that that's out for public comment until the middle of July. So we won't have the final rules till the middle of July, but this is kind of how I'm thinking of our priorities. We do need to look at short-term, our immediate fiscal relief. So we did have negative impacts last year mainly from reduced revenue from COVID. And so we want to figure out how to restore some of the impacts that had. You know, we had to defer projects, we had to defer some capital outlay. So we do want to kind of see what we can do to alleviate the immediate fiscal impact that we had. We always want to value our employees, our essential workers. If there's anything that we can do in the area of supporting our employees with these funds, I'm going to be a big proponent of that. And then we can switch to long-term budget sustainability. You know, what could we do to improve our balance sheet? What could we do? You know, we can't pay down debt, and fortunately, we don't have much in the way of pension liability, but we do have unfunded liabilities for our retiree health insurance, for example. We do have long-term structural budget issues that would be nice if this kind of gave us a shot in the arm to address. And then number 4, you know, we do want to remember that this was a public health emergency. So if there's something that we can do to really improve the health of our community, that would be a great one-time investment. And then assist with rebuilding the community. Again, our local government's really not in the ongoing business of supporting the private sector, but to the extent that we have flexibility with these funds to look at, you know, one-time needs. And again, I think those would probably be in the area of leveraging or contributing to projects that others are also contributing to, not just having the county fund them. But we do have that. We do have that as an allowable spending rule for the funds. So Megan did an overview of the 4 categories. And the first one, I've broken into 2 segments because they're very different. So I'm going to go through each of these eligible use categories that are within the rules. And then for each of them, just give you some ideas and projects that I've been made aware of for your awareness. So the first one, eligible use number 1A, I'm calling it, is direct response to COVID-19 issues. So these are almost word for word from the Treasury guidelines. But this category, we want to look at supporting public health expenditures. You know, so that also includes capital investments in any public facilities. For example, if we want to improve the heating and air conditioning in our public buildings, or better, you know, be able to use the space in a safer way, that would be an eligible category. There's also a need to contribute to ongoing support of mental health and substance use disorder prevention and treatment. That funding for these programs has been cut pretty significantly in the last few years in Calhoun County. So I know that that's an eligible category, eligible use under this category. And then the third piece is that we can actually cover payroll for our county employees who have been working on COVID-19 response. And so our county employees have been tracking their payroll, basically using a code for their time entry since the beginning of the pandemic. And Megan's been reporting that on the monthly financial statements. So I want to say it's about $1 million to date this year, just in payroll related to COVID. And unless it's overtime, that is an expense that was not eligible to be reimbursed by FEMA. So we can look at something like that as well. So some ideas in this area, I already mentioned the first one, covering costs that are not FEMA eligible. Another area we didn't have good luck with getting reimbursement under FEMA were our technology upgrades, adding laptops, boosting our internet access, the VPN, the soft phones on our laptops, and anything in the future that we can do to improve the ability to have video conferencing, to improve cybersecurity, our backup power supplies. Those are in review right now with Brad Wilcox and the IT staff working on what those needs might be. Same thing with facilities enhancements. If we wanted to, improve our facilities, for example, getting rid of the drinking fountains that have been covered in plastic for the last year, and getting water filling stations, just some things like that. Again, we're working on the CIP list to figure out what kind of facilities enhancements make the best investment for us. I mentioned substance use disorder services. We have our PA2 alcohol tax budget that has been cut drastically. The state has also cut block grant funding for our substance abuse prevention services, both of the agencies in Battle Creek and in Albion. And they could probably use one-time or increased appropriations for the next few years until that funding gets backfilled. And then, in discussions with our health officer, Eric Pessel, we're thinking of some transformational public health destination project. We know we have some really low public health indicators in Calhoun County. If there's one-time funding, wouldn't it really be nice? Again, this would probably be a partnership idea to figure out how to put in place something that really addresses and helps our community become healthier individuals. So then moving on past the public health response, we talk about the negative economic impact. This is the second component of that first one. Economic harm can include individuals that still have issues, households, and then looking specifically at the industries that had the most trouble with the shutdowns with the public health emergency. The emphasis here is really trying to consider whether the impacts were due to the COVID pandemic as opposed to longer term economic or industrial trends that were unrelated. But to the extent that we know that households are still struggling to pay rent, utilities, all of that, counties are allowed in this case for the first time ever to give cash assistance if we wanted to. We could, create programs for home repairs, workforce development, and training. Hardest hit communities are somewhat defined with our census tract data put out by HUD, but there are opportunities to, in those areas, create affordable housing development. And Krista Trout-Edwards is going to talk a little bit about a possible initiative there. And then for small businesses and impacted industries, we would be allowed to support any reopening efforts of businesses in the tourism, travel, and hospitality industries. And we could also aid in a planned expansion or upgrade of a facility that relates to travel and hospitality that was delayed due to the pandemic. This act also allows county government to rehire any staff that we were not able to fill those positions. We would compare our current staffing to what we had in January of 2020, right before the pandemic hit, and this would allow us to rehire those. The question here would be, okay, that's fine for the next 3 years. We would just have to hope that our revenues catch up and we could sustain those. Otherwise, they would need to be considered more short-term or temporary positions. So some ideas in this category that we'll be looking at, Treasurer Brian Wensauer and our Deputy Treasurer Melinda Weaver will be talking today about assistance to individuals and businesses that are still struggling with property tax delinquencies. When you think about hardest hit industries, we'll hear from Battle Creek Unlimited and our Convention and Visitors Bureau today about some ideas for assisting with rebuilding the county's capacity to attract tourism. And then housing, homelessness, and workforce development also fits into this category. So again, the land banks initiatives would fit well here. And then we've also had requests from our area homeless shelters to help them better be equipped to serve the public even after the pandemic is over. They're asking for some capital funding assistance. We know that within our justice system and within our courts, we have a lot of work to do to return to full capacity and beyond. So our chief judge and or court administrators will be here today also to talk about needs that they're proposing that might be good investments to help with that initiative. So then switching to the second eligible use, we are allowed to calculate what our lost revenue was for 2020, 21, 22, 23. obviously the future years can't be calculated right now. But 2020, we can calculate right now. We've been working on that and we are still seeking more clarification. The way that the rule is reading, you basically look at your 2019 revenues, add 4% with the assumption that your revenues could have increased by 4%. That's just a number that Treasury put out there. And then you compare that to what our actual revenues were in 2020, and that's the loss. Some of the details of that are they're requiring it to be done on an entity-wide basis. We're not sure exactly what that means because entity-wide might include, for example, when you look at our county audit, it might include the medical care facility, includes for sure the road department, includes trust and agency funds and delinquent tax revolving funds. So there's some very strange nuances to that we are going to be meeting with our audit firm next week and see if they can help with some clarification. But let's say we end up with 3 million calculated as the 2020 lost revenue. That to that extent that we would have that 3 million as a calculated loss, that is the broadest latitude that we have in this whole ARPA Act to use the funding. We can use it for things that don't fit into any of those other categories up to that amount. So let's say it's 3 million. And we can use that just like we would any other county dollars to provide government services. So that is where if we were going to do just a general economic development project or fund road improvements, those would not fit under the other categories because they're not responding to the pandemic necessarily. But we could spend up to the extent of our lost revenue amount for anything that we're allowed to provide. So that includes, you know, direct aid to citizens, just, you know, basically any of our eligible government services. So some of the needs that we, I went backwards, I think. Hold on. Okay, so some of the priority needs that we have within county government in this area that I can think of are our public safety sheriff's budget essentially took a pretty big hit with reduced revenues. And so we may be able to reimburse the short-term budget so that we don't have to require more cuts in the area of public safety. We may choose to reimburse the road department for their lost revenues. Although if you think of most other counties, this doesn't really fit well within ARPA funds that come to counties because most counties don't have road departments. And so the thought is that the state really needs to carve out of their funding for lost revenues money to pass through to road commissions and road agencies. However, we can choose up to the extent that we have this discretionary funding, we could choose to invest in roads in Calhoun County. I think we definitely want to look at accelerating our CIP project funding. We had to slow that down a little bit over the last couple of years, and our CIP projects, our facilities enhancements and all of that have really been funded either on a cash basis or we've had to issue capital improvement bonds. So it would be nice to get a little bit ahead of that cycle and not have to issue debt again, you know, as soon. We can also, if there are non-federal grants that we have that we need matching, we could use this funding to help with that. If we wanted to invest in more parks enhancements, that would fall into this category. And then I mentioned earlier, we really do have a need to address our retiree health unfunded liabilities. And the act specifically prohibits us to pay down pension unfunded liabilities, but it's defined very specifically as defined benefit pensions. So there's no prohibition, I guess, on us, you know, putting money into a retiree health trust fund, for example, that we just created with MERS, or, you know, somehow changing that program. So it's definitely it's one of the things that continues to get mentioned by our bond rating agencies when they look at the overall county financial status. All right, so the third category, and there's just one more after this, is the essential worker premium pay. And it is defined as premium pay, so I'm not really sure if some or all of these items really will fit into this category, but I want you to know that the county administration is supportive of somehow responding to our workers that continue to perform essential work during the COVID pandemic. If we wanted to give premium pay, there's a limit in dollar amount, but all county employees would be eligible based on the way that U.S. Treasury has defined this. We could also provide grants to any employers throughout the county for premium pay to those who actually had to, perform in-person work and interact with others. The Treasury guidance does say that if we did this, and it's totally optional, we need to prioritize pay for lower income workers. And we would need to do that calculation to make sure that we weren't providing premium pay that would increase any of our workers' total pay above 150% of either the state or county average annual wage. So this is one area where I think we do want to think about the public, the public perception. And we were able to provide hazard pay last year to our public health and public safety frontline workers with some dedicated grant funding. So again, this amount is limited, and we could give retroactive pay, and all premium pay is optional. None of it is required. So the only examples and ideas that I think are worth making a priority, we could potentially give employee vaccine incentives. I think we have had, just based on the trends throughout the country, maybe around half of our employees have been vaccinated, and it really fits into our wellness as a business strategy, because we pay actual health claims. We suffer when people are out sick. It hurts the operations and it costs us money. So we really would like to incentivize more employees to get vaccinated, and we already do a wellness cash benefit. We would like to, just add this basically to a similar concept where we could, if employees were vaccinated, we could give them a cash incentive that would show up on their paycheck. Another item that's been talked about even last year was a one-time increase in cash outs of accumulated paid time off balances, with the thought that some people accumulated higher balances than normal. At some point, it's use it or lose it. And so, that would be a way that we could use this funding to allow them to get some extra cash in their paycheck out of the amount that they've already earned. And that would cover our budget impact. And then the third item that I actually heard from, listening to best practices through all these webinars is, look at the employees that had to work remotely for the last year, and did they have increased work costs, higher internet, higher, buying supplies, printers, whatever they had to do at home. Could we somehow figure out approximately what that was and give stipends to employees? Those are the ideas that I came up with for supporting our essential workers. The final category of eligible use is investment, specifically water, sewer, and broadband, not other infrastructure, not roads. So we don't directly own or provide water, sewer, broadband currently. We definitely are interested in working on a broadband initiatives through our new task force. So we could use some of this funding to provide some of the assisting costs to households to improve their digital literacy. We definitely have plans to add a staff person to Lucy Blair's area, our communications office, to staff the task force. And then we may want to use some funding for assistance in seeking grants for broadband. But I think the hope is that there are other state, federal funds that will be coming down and available to actually, help build out the broadband infrastructure, in addition to just, the private sector providing it and individuals signing up for it. The only other item that may fit in this category could be something related to the lead abatement initiatives that are already going on throughout Calhoun County. So next steps for us. Megan mentioned we're continuing to work on revenue loss calculations. It's really important to understand, out of the 26 million, how much of that do we really have that broad discretion over, and how much in the remainder of it we would have to invest in projects that fit within those other three categories. So we're continuing to identify the needs. Today, we're asking for board and public input on the priorities. Ongoing discussions with our department heads, our elected officials, And we have a meeting on June 4 with all of our city managers and mayors and Board Chair Frisbee and I, and we're going to make that a topic of discussion. How could we collaborate specifically with the cities because they're getting the other largest portion of the local funding. And then the road department is hosting a meeting with township supervisors on June 8th to talk about potentially leveraging some of their funding to do a better job and get ahead of improving our roads. The final treasury guidance is coming out mid-July. We do have to do some reporting starting in August. There is no rush to spend any of this funding. Brian Wenshauer has it invested nicely and safely. And we want to continue to watch what these other state and federal funding packages are going to provide. We can definitely have a tentative plan. I think we need to carve out what is the most urgent, potentially for budget appropriations this year. And then, we'll be building into future year budgets, and those can be adjusted at any time. So I can anticipate as early, maybe even as in the next month or so, bringing some appropriations requests to the board for those items that really need to happen quickly if they're going to have the impact that we need them to. So I just put a link in the slides, and there's a PDF version of this document linked to the calendar invite for the commissioners. But the two best sources to read all of this stuff are NACO, the National County Association. They've got some really nice analysis of this, and then US Treasury for sure. They both have websites designed specifically for this local funding. So I am going to stop sharing and we'll take questions that any of you might have.
Kelly?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, Chair. I just want to know, is there a category, and you guys, we are just in the process of taking masks off and coming back together. So I love that. Okay. So I don't want to talk about another pandemic, but are there categories or a category that, would put funding aside? Because this is something that all of us in our lifetime, this is the first time we've ever seen anything like this. But for our future leaders or for in the future, if anything like this should happen, so it's not something that they're, not involved in, are there categories for I guess what I'm saying, let's just look at first responders. Are there categories for helping first responders in training in for something like this if it should ever happen again? Does that make sense? Do you know something?
It does make sense. Yeah, it does make sense. We would be able to invest in training for sure, and in creating or improving plans that would help us in the future. Where we would not be able to spend this, we wouldn't be able to put it into a fund to have sitting there for future pandemics. But we could definitely invest in any kind of training or response efforts that would, build the capacity. Like, for example, our United Way has their local response consortium. If they're working on plans or something like that, training, we could definitely use funding to contribute.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that actually sounds great. Again, like I said, I hate to think about anything else like this ever happening again, or putting a community or our community through anything like this, but it would kind of help, especially for our small business owners that struggled, in our community so much with that. If we, had something that we could start preparing for emergencies like that.
Thank you.
Or like this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, we'll move along. Next up will be Chris Sargent.
So I'm not sure if Chris is here yet. I had scheduled him for 9:30, and I know he might have had something right at 9.
Kelly, I'll go back. What would be some specific areas you talked about, the unfunded retiree healthcare that our bond agency often look at and say, you know, you got to do something with that. What are the other top areas that would, if we invested into those, that would have long-term benefits for taxpayers through maintaining or even lowering our bond rating?
Increasing our bond rating. You know, I think getting ahead of at some point, we've got a few facilities that are going to need to be replaced or reconfigured, right? The juvenile home, the road department, even the jail. So I think, you know, trying to get ahead of a point where we don't get to crisis and then not have any funding for, you know, maintaining that. We again, you know, when I was at the community college, we had a dedicated, you know, voted bond authority. Some of them have sinking funds. We don't have a stream of funding for capital. So we're always kind of, you know, trying to finance those in creative ways and look at energy savings. But I think in the long term, it would be helpful to our taxpayers and, you know, just to keep us, to not let us fall behind on keeping up with our facilities maintenance would be kind of the only other sort of balance sheet item that I think is important.
And you know, from the get-go, a lot of us have been saying we want to invest these where it's not just a one-time investment that looks nice, but it's a one-time investment that pays dividends down the road, so that dollar keeps getting saved or spent over and over and over again. And so those thoughts about bond ratings and you know, lowering overhead or something that makes the bond rating agencies go, that's a good thing, and we're going to reward you for that, would always be good in my eyes. So, right.
Well, look, it looks like Chris is here. If we're ready to have him on.
Yep.
Oh, there you are. Hi, Chris.
Good morning.
Oh, we're a little ahead. Imagine that.
And I'm a little behind. Imagine that. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're actually ahead of time. So, Chris, the floor is yours.
Great. Well, thanks for the time this morning and the opportunity to share a little bit of information with all of you that hopefully helps guide and influence some of the conversation now and into the future. I'm Chris Sargent. I'm the CEO for United Way in Battle Creek and Kalamazoo. And I'm here to share a little bit more about some of the materials that hopefully you've received and have heard about before around ALICE. My goal is to spend about 10 to 15 minutes kind of giving a high level overview so that there's plenty of time for you all to ask questions, probe a little bit deeper, and information as it relates to that. So, but you all know me well enough probably that I'm a little long-winded, so I'm really challenged to try to do that 10 to 15 minutes, but that's be my goal. So with that, I think what I'll do first is kind of share my screen and go into the presentation. So the first thing I want to just highlight with the ALICE report is, can you all see the screen? I'll see the power. Thanks, Kelly. Is this data is from 2019. So like a lot of data sets like this, it's you know, roughly about 2 years old. The ALICE report, this is our third report. We publish a new updated one every 2 years in the state of Michigan. And it's a collaboration of all the United Ways in Michigan coming together, working with Rutgers University, to be able to take the American survey data and to be able to put it in a comprehensive format that allows us to understand the impacts and what's going on in community. I'll try to be careful not to read slides to you, but just to highlight a few things that are on each of these slides. ALICE is an acronym, and there's a couple of ALICE acronyms out there. So this isn't about active shooter training in public schools. This is asset limited, income constrained, employed. So really what we're talking about is working families that are above the federal poverty guidelines. So like, for example, federal poverty threshold for a family of 4 is roughly less than $24,000 a year in annual household income. What Alice looks at is those that sit above poverty, and in broad strokes up to about 250% of poverty. And in a moment, I'll take you through a couple of scenarios that'll make that hopefully a little bit more clear in terms of what types of families we're talking about and what incomes we're talking about. It's important to recognize these are folks that are working. So these are people that are working 1, 2, 3 jobs, but are struggling to meet kind of basic household survival budgets. And you'll see over here on the right-hand side some key terms. So one of the things in the household survival budgets that you'll also notice is it's pretty conservative. So you might ask the question, well, what about this expense? What about student loan debt, or what about some other expenses that aren't built into it? It's actually a pretty conservative budget that some of you might say it's actually underrepresenting the actual expenses for some families. The other thing that we know about Alice families is, for the most part, because of the challenges that they have about the incomes coming into their household, there's not a lot of savings. There's not a lot of money for emergencies. So unfortunately, if the car needs new tires to get to work, there's not always the resources to be able to do that. So they might have a blowout on the way to work and then not show up today. Those types of scenarios permeate kind of the Alice households pretty significantly. If at any point you have questions or want to stop to probe a little bit deeper as I go through, please don't hesitate to do that. I'm very supportive of that. So for the 2019 data that the most recent Alice report that just came out earlier this year looks at, this is kind of the population information, number of households, median household income. You'll see that's a bit below the state average. That's an important thing to recognize. Granted, don't put a lot of thought into the unemployment rate. Obviously, that's significantly different now. But what is really important to recognize, because the Alice threshold, we talk about who sits below the Alice threshold, meaning they're struggling to make ends meet on a month-to-month basis. It looks at both the Alice families as well as those that are in poverty. So what we know is, for example, for Calhoun County in 2019, there was about 13% of our community set below the federal poverty guidelines. About 26% then additionally were below the Alice threshold. So combined, 39% of our families in Calhoun County are struggling to make ends meet month to month. Here you see a little bit more information over time. So again, this is the third Alice report in about 6 years. So we went all the way back and looked at what's the trend data tell us in terms of from 2010 to 2019, how many households are impacted in terms of Alice on the top line and poverty on the bottom. The trends are actually going in the right direction. Again, we don't have, this is pre-pandemic, so we don't have post-pandemic data yet. But the trends were actually moving slightly in a better direction compared to the previous 4 or 5 years. Here's the chart that I think is the most important. And I'll pull up the other document that was also included here at the end of the presentation that kind of dives a little bit deeper on this. But this is the Alice survival budget. You'll see on the left-hand side, things like housing, childcare, food, all the way down through in terms of expenses. If you are curious about what does miscellaneous mean, what we recognized in previous reports is there was no consideration for things like cell phone and Wi-Fi connection, and that's become, in our culture, pretty significant. So most of those miscellaneous items are built around access to technology and connectivity for families. Across the top, you'll see that breaks down the family unit: single adult, 2 adults, children, etc. I think it's always important to note that if you're 2 adults with 2 children and childcare, your childcare costs are actually more expensive than your housing costs. So typically housing's number one, except when you're talking about childcare, that gets pretty expensive. And I think in a moment, the one thing I'll suggest is we know that childcare is even more critical right now because access and slots available become the real challenge that we're experiencing in the community. Ultimately, what it does is it gets down to the bottom and says, so to be above the ALICE threshold for a single adult, 2 adults with school-age children, all the way up to 2 adults with 2 in childcare, what's the annual household income that you have to make to be at or above the ALICE threshold? So for example, if you 2 adults with 2 children in childcare, your annual household income has to be $62,508 or above to be able to be above the survival budget, if you will. And it breaks it down in terms of an hourly wage, which I think is really helpful because then it's saying cumulatively in the household have to be making $31 or more an hour on a full-time schedule. So you'll see some of these numbers in terms of single adult. Some might ask the question, can you really get housing like apartments for $486 a month with utilities? You know that. So that's where I say this could be a bit of a conservative budget, for example, that some might say, I actually think the costs are higher. We tried to be careful not to overestimate any expenses associated with that for the integrity of the data. This, and I apologize, probably a little small for folks, but this breaks down municipalities. So the one thing the last 2 reports have done is take the data beyond just county level and break it down into municipalities. So townships, cities, etc. A couple things I would highlight in regards to this. You can see that every municipality has a percentage from a low of 22% in Marshall Township to a high of 57% in Albion City, where that's the percentage of households that are below the ALICE threshold. So every municipality has households, families, that are in a situation where they're below the ALICE threshold and struggling to make ends meet. And it's quite a range. I think sometimes we always assume it's just an urban core, but you'll see even in some of the townships, it can be pretty significant. The next few slides really look at the inequities or disparities that we see. And I think this is helpful when we think about strategies for investment. I know this is true for United Way, especially when we think about the nearly $2 million that we've invested over the last year plus for disaster kind of COVID relief efforts, mostly around basic needs support, that this information can also help us understand where to prioritize to support community. Again, the dark blue boxes at the bottom of each of these are the number of households that are in poverty. The lighter blue just above them are the number of households that are below the ALICE threshold. And it's broken out and disaggregated by race and ethnicity in this particular slide. So you'll see disproportionately Black households are more impacted, both from a poverty and below the ALICE threshold. Although again, all of our populations are impacted by this. This is both a economic indicator set, but it also does disaggregate by race and ethnicity. We disaggregated it by families with children. So you'll notice that here we've got first column is married, second is single family, single female household, third column single male household, and then total households. Disproportionately single female households are more impacted when it comes to both poverty and ALICE. And then age. So under 25, 25 to 44, 45 to 65, or 64, excuse me, and then 65 and older. And when it comes to 65 and older, that's the population that's disproportionately impacted by both poverty and ALICE. I think for some of us, this data is helpful and maybe even a bit surprising. We might have had, different assumptions in terms of who's most impacted by poverty and below the ALICE threshold. So hopefully that gives us some context about So single female head of households, senior households, Black households are most impacted by federal poverty rates being below that and being below the ALICE threshold. But again, it's not just those that are impacted, it's impacted across. So that is the presentation. Let me pause there and see if there's any particular questions that you have about the data. I can always pull that back up and go back to a slide if there is any.
I have a comment, Chris, thank you for that. And it kind of relates to Steve, your question just before this. So one of the things that contributes to our bond rating not being the very highest at AAA is that Standard & Poor's continues to consider Calhoun County to have a weak economy, and they point directly at the average household income, which Chris just pointed out is about $10,000 per household less than the state average, and also the average market value of our homes. And so if we think of, investments, one-time investments that could really boost the economy long-term and in turn, help our bond rating, help our overall outlook, investing in areas that would increase average household income or increase the market value of our housing. I think those, just add value to our community as a whole, but they also have positive economic returns to the county and our ability to finance things going forward. And you'll hear, from some of the other speakers today, how those projects could have return on investment. But that struck me, as you just pointed out, the household income is one that we always think we can't directly control. But if there are anything we could do to help with that, it's going to benefit all of us.
Yep.
Anybody else?
I'll just mention, we also got a slide, Chris, from you that talked about the city township, that trend table. Did you show that and I missed it?
I haven't yet. Yeah, so let me get PowerPoint to cooperate and get out of that. Let me just pull this up real quick too. So this also looks at, again, disaggregated by township, city, local municipality, both the number of households and the percent of families living below the ALICE threshold and in poverty. And it looks at it over the last 9 years or so, 7 years. So from 2012 up at the top, 15, 17, and 19. So every 2 years, just so we can see some of that trend data and some of that breakdown. I know each of you as commissioners represent different parts of the county, and so this might be helpful for you to have the data that helps you understand more of that.
And then do you know did you have what the statewide average for percent of ALICE in poverty?
Yeah, so the statewide percentage is at 42% in 2019 data. So we're a little bit better as a county than the statewide data. But I think, overall about 4 in 10 households in our community are struggling, kind of meeting basic needs. Let me just lift up, I know it's a little bit disconnected to ALICE, but I think it's important. The county has been an investor in the Community Resilience Resource Manager, which is a position that's really designed to bring together the nonprofit sector, the public sector, especially has worked very closely over the last year, looking at the investments to be made and the mobilization of resources most appropriately to those greatest impacted around disaster and COVID relief efforts. So that group that you invest in has helped us really streamline the system where people get access to resources, but also think strategically about where we invest those resources, both for United Way's disaster relief funds, but also other funds in the community kind of moving forward. So I think we're getting better as a system across the county, really looking at the ways in which we're investing resources and we have access to those to best meet the needs of our families. So just lift that up as a key resource and important piece.
Chris, I had one question come in through chat about where the housing costs data comes from.
I'd have to get back to you on that because I'm again, it's part of the, so there's a few layers that go into building the ALICE data. It starts with Rutgers University kind of using the American Survey data on an every 2-year basis to pull together. And then at a state and local level, we also have kind of experts that work with us to make sure that the data that we're using locally is relevant and is drawn from, I don't know exactly the data source, but Upjohn Institute is the organization that works with us locally to test and verify that these budgeted items like housing are relevant to the market that we're in. But I can follow up and share more specifically on that.
And then I guess I'll ask one more ginormous question, which is, how could local government help with, improve this data or
Yeah.
these households? I mean, what's the solution?
Well, without getting into a debate around sustainable wage thresholds, fundamentally, we know that wages and benefits are the primary indicator for how our families are doing. I don't think anybody would be surprised by that. So the key is I think sometimes there's a general debate out there that starts looking at things like $15 an hour, or using that as a threshold. And again, I don't want to take a position on that. I think the ALICE data shows us that it depends on the family unit too, and depends on the size. But wages and benefits are critical to this, making sure that full-time people that are working hard are making the kind of wages that allow them to be sustainable for their family units. I think what we know in Michigan is 80% of our jobs pay less than $20 an hour. And the trend expectation from Upjohn Institute is that's only going to continue to be an issue. And so I think we need to look at what does, and I don't think that's a government issue, right? I mean, I think it's a community issue, and government's a part of that says, how do we support our employers and our community to be thinking about wages and growth appropriately to meet the household budgets of our families. I think the other thing too is so when we talk about the dollars coming in, whether it's American Rescue Plan dollars or other resources like that, how do we work together to both leverage and to make sure they're most efficient going to the greatest need in our community? And that's where I think the kind of public-private partnership, if you will, between government and organizations in the nonprofit sector and funders is about. So how do we take advantage of resources that are coming in to maximize their use, and to pair that with private resources that could go even further? So I realize that's a big high-level answer, Kelly, to your question, but I think it's exactly like this conversation that says, okay, there's resources that are coming in or have already come in, and how do we continue to take advantage of that and lift that up and then invest strategically? So for example, if somebody said, do we need more money right now for housing? That's a complex question, but the simple answer is there's a lot of resources in right now to help those who are behind on rent. And so we want to first see how those resources we can connect the families that need those resources to them, and see how that goes before we add any additional dollars or assume that we have to before we do that. So it'd just be one example.
Yeah, this is related to the chat, but I also thought, well, the other side of the equation is driving costs down. And so, if there's a way to help with affordable housing or childcare costs, sounds like that would help the bottom line.
Yep. I'm going to drop a link in the chat box too, if I can, that will just give everybody access to the ALICE report. And you can look at it even more deeply. So there's a tool now that allows you to explore even more deeply some of the municipality data. So hopefully for each of you in the districts that you represent, that you have good access to that.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Chris?
I have one more, sorry. I know it's early with the ARPA funds, but since you covered the Kalamazoo area, have any of the local governments over there asked the United Way to sort of help administer any of the funds or do anything with that?
Nobody's asked us to help administer funds yet, but we're in the same conversations as like today, which is saying, how can we help support both from the system level, making sure that the resources are accessible and inclusive. And if there's a way that United Way and our partners can help invest locally, strategically on the ground, we'd welcome that. But similar, to now, Kelly, we're in discussions. Our position is we want to be beneficial and helpful where we can be, and we've got dozens of partners who stand at the ready to do that with us. So we'd welcome that, but only where it's strategic and beneficial, obviously.
All right, Chris, thanks for your time and presentation.
Thank you.
Consider all moving forward. So thanks for all the assistance today.
Could I request maybe like a 5 to 10 minute intermission since we're a little ahead, and then we could reconvene and start with the presentations? Would that make sense?
That'd be perfect. I was going to make that recommendation myself.
I could read your mind. It's not me, it's you.
Yeah. So
That'd be great.
We
Yes.
will start, how about we start back at 9:45?
Great. See you soon.
Okay.
Well, Joe. Joe, is Linda going to join you?
She is, yes.
Okay,
You want to start a little early? I can probably text her here.
that'd be great.
Okay.
Chair Frisbee, this is Brian.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of interesting with Chris Sargent's presentation, and it's really started to make me thinking about our foreclosure and our forfeiture visits as to how can we draw upon the health department to educate people on keeping their house clean. I think a lot of our issues, we had one that we had a lot of infestation areas where there's small kids running around and stuff like that. But a lot of that Alice report really started to bring up some more things of why when we do our presentation to make us think. I thought that was very, very good. And I just wanted to mention that.
Thanks. There would be a lot of homes to clean, let me tell you. I've been in thousands.
Actually, I was thinking the same thing, you guys, Brian. I really was, just from just a lot of the housing conditions that I've seen and the, the living conditions that a lot of people are living in. And I'm not saying it's because of, COVID, or I'm just saying that, right, it's a major problem. It really is.
We've seen this in my 4 years and knocking on doors for forfeiture, not foreclosure, but forfeiture. This is before they foreclose. And the animal feces, the infestations, there's got to be some way. And it's really got me thinking, and I know this is part of what our presentation is to really put our thinking caps on. And I really appreciate the different groups that are going to be presenting here, because this is going to allow you as the board to be able to make some good use of this money, and it's got us all thinking. And I think this is great.
I do too. Again, it's got me thinking towards the future and, our future leaders, and then now our families, because people are really, I've seen a lot of things that I didn't realize was going on. I guess that's the best way for me to put it. In housing.
Joe, were you able to get a hold of Linda?
Yes, I texted her. She said she's going to jump on right now.
Awesome. Oh, she's here. Let her in. Linda Freibler should be promoted to a panelist. All right. Next, we have Linda Freibler, who's the CEO of Calhoun County Visitors and Convention Bureau, I think, and Joe Soborowski, who's the CEO of Battle Creek Unlimited. Take it away.
Thank you. Am I able to share my screen? Is that okay?
Yep.
All right. Give me 1 second here. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the hotel, and then I'm going to kind of broaden this a little bit larger. So just kind of wanted to give you an anticipation of kind of what you're going to see here. And first of all, thank you all for giving us the opportunity to present today. But Battle Creek Unlimited, in conjunction with many community partners, has obtained ownership of the McCamley Plaza Hotel. And we've been working over the last 6 to 9 months, putting together a capital stack to improve this hotel. Not just make it operational, but make it transformational and really change the appearance and get it back to its glory. So what you're seeing here on the front of the screen are just some renderings of what the potential of the exterior of it could look like. I'm going to go to the next slide here, and kind of depicts the importance of this. This is the current state of the facility. This is why we originally filed suit to peel this property out of the previous owner's hands, because it was continuing to deteriorate. Over the last several months, we've hired engineers, architects, and we have remedies for all of the things that you see here, a complete reprogram of the hotel. The next page here is just kind of an estimated cost of some of those imageries that you see when we talk about totally transforming the hotel. The estimated cost is north of $30 million. BCU has some structured debt. We have some cash into it. And really the importance of when I started putting this capital stack together, which is not foreign to the Battle Creek or Calhoun County markets, is the appraisal of a $30 million project comes in as stabilized at $20 million in the hotel industry. And there's some discount baked in there for the COVID situation. So if we weren't in a COVID situation, could it appraise for 22, 23 million? Possibly. So what that does is a bank typically loans on 65% loan to value on hotels. That means we can take out structured debt of about $13 million. So what does that mean? That means we create a gap where we need some equity between 10.3 and $11.5 million. There's some other components in there, the MEDC, PACE equity, to really get up to that $30 million number. So far, we've been having conversations with many partners, and today is the first conversation that we're officially having with the county. But just to give you a list of individuals or organizations that are participating or considering participating in this project. We got the City of Battle Creek, Bronson Battle Creek Community Partners, Calhoun County CVB, and the ones that you see with asterisks there have already pledged a commitment. We've got Consumers Energy, Miller Foundation. The Miller Foundation has pledged $1 million. We got WKKF are considering, Battle Creek Unlimited, the Kellogg Company, and the MEDC. The economic impact numbers of just the hotel, and I'm just referring to the hotel at this point because we're going to talk about the entire complex here in a few slides. But as you can see, the operational jobs, 163 operational jobs. Payroll year 1, because there's a ramp up, is a little bit slower, but payroll year 5 is over 5 million. And the local impacts on taxes year 1 is 670,000. The visitor expenditures, this was done with an Upjohn Institute study. Dining and groceries, so that's mainly people that are staying at the hotel and going out to restaurants and dining. Transportation, entertainment, and retail. You can see the spends, the spin-off spends of the hotel guest. The construction jobs created, again, just on the hotel, it's 207. The personal income from that is 8.44 million. And I put the tax impacts here beyond year 1. So in 2023, the tax impacts reach 713,000. And in 2028, 2029, it's anticipated to reach $1 million. Just to give folks an idea of where we're headed, what we're thinking, this is what a refreshed McCamley could look like. For those that aren't totally familiar with the hotel, it's a 239 room hotel. It's 15 stories. It's connected to the Kellogg Arena. It's connected to Unit 2, which is what we call the old mall. Planned timeline. We've already got hard cost bids estimates for phase 1. That's your mechanical systems, your HVAC, your roofs, the elevators. We've already got the hard cost on that. General contractor will be identified in Q2. Hotel operator solidified in Q2. A hotel flag solidified. We've made application to Hilton. This is going to be a DoubleTree by Hilton, and we're working on the capital stack. So all the stars align. We will begin construction July, August on phase 1. We'll complete the design. When I say complete the design, that's the finishes, the looks, the layout of the interior in early to late fall, and those will be bid out. And then that work will start in the winter months with the completion and operational goal of being in Q4 of 2022, right before the holiday season. The uniqueness and the community benefit of this that we've been working on with a lot of community partners, we want to create a teaching hotel, if you will. The hospitality industry has a lot of upward mobility. We've got Grand Valley in our community that has a hospitality program. Many other colleges have hospitality programs. So we've been in discussions, or we've had Kellogg Community College at the table. We've had Grand Valley at the table. We've had local school systems at the table, and we're just beginning this process. The importance is getting it under construction first, but we want to create a teaching hotel that exposes our youth and our residents to the industry and gives them some upward mobility into the industry. And what's unique about this is we will own the property via 50 Capitol Avenue Development Corporation. So we have the ability to manage the hiring practices. So we will have some equitable outcomes on the hiring practices as well. Now I'm going to kind of go a little bit larger. So as we were putting the capital stack together, as conversations were being had with funders, potential funders, and others, it really honed in on, like, hey, the hotel, the arena, and that entire complex, they really ham and egg each other. Like, you can't have one without the other. The hotel will be successful, but it could be hampered by not having a completely refreshed complex. The arena could feed off of the hotel, and the hotel can feed off the arena. So that's why at the bottom, I have a $51.5 million estimated total project that includes the hotel, some arena refreshment, and the old mall. And I have estimated there because those are estimates, because this has really been an evolution, and this has been a nuance here in probably the last 6 weeks about, hey, let's put some costs together on that entire complex. So what I'm here presenting before Calhoun County Commission today for consideration is, we know that some of the ARPA dollars are intended to be used for recovery of the hospitality and tourism industry. And some of the ARPA language is that bullet point there. We all know that provide tourism, travel, hospitality industry to the negative economic impacts. And then I separated out just the hotel. I'm not making a dollar ask. I'm just presenting and giving you a consideration of a project that we think can have a very, very positive impact countywide. So just the hotel philanthropic dollars leveraged, if we get all of these partners into the project, would be somewhere between 9.3 and $10.5 million, with the total project of $30.8 million. If we move down to the whole complex with these estimated costs and some consideration from Calhoun County and some of these ARPA dollars, we have the potential to leverage between $27 and $32 million of additional philanthropic dollars amongst the partners that I listed, for an estimated total project of $51.5 million. And we just kind of listed some of the things that the county could consider as they see this project. We believe this fits very well into what the ARPA dollars have been set aside, or at least a percentage has been set aside for, but it goes just beyond just a single hotel and a complex. This is job creation for LMI households, equitable hiring practices, construction jobs for the trades. There's going to be hotel overflow throughout the county. This is one of the only hotels in our county that has the ability to host large events due to the fact that it's connected to the arena and the meeting space. The increased spin-off spending in the hospitality industry for the bars, restaurants, and small business. And frankly, capturing a lot of leakage that leaks out of this county because we don't have, and we do have the casino, but we don't have, i.e. the Radisson that downtown Kalamazoo has. So a lot of those things are leaking over. increased tourism ability and spend, and increased hotel rooms for the CVB. And at the bottom here, I just kind of wanted to point out, currently, we don't have any tax abatements programmed into this project. I'm trying to prevent that. The MEDC may force our hands on that, but I'm trying to prevent that because I'm not opposed to projects paying taxes, which lead to a broader community impact. So I'm going to stop there, and then I'm going to hand it over to Linda.
Joe, I wanted to ask one question because it's specific to this. I thought that you mentioned the PACE program. And for the commissioners, just a reminder that the county commission created the property assessed clean energy program several years ago, and the treasurer manages that. And the only project we've helped so far is the YMCA. They were able to do a lot of energy improvements, and this provides financing that they couldn't otherwise get from the bank. So I wanted to ask Joe, is that something that's in consideration that might be helpful for this?
Yes, we've already been pre-qualified, and we're programming for the hotel portion a $3 million PACE position.
Okay, so that would be another area where, the county would be involved as an assist, not direct financial, but yeah, okay.
Correct. Linda? Here.
All right. Am
Morning.
I on?
You are.
All right. Well, thank you for allowing us to talk about this exciting project. I know Joe talked about this really as a hotel, but from a CVB perspective, in a convention perspective, it really is a convention center for us. So if you think about it, McKinley and its connection to Kellogg Arena provided the only meeting space in the county that could host large meetings, associations, conventions, banquets, large family reunions, weddings, things from the Knights of Columbus Convention to the mayor's convention, citywide events, those sorts of things. In fact, the complex at the hotel has over 20,000 square feet in meeting space. And it really, as I said, is that's the uniqueness for it. It's not just another hotel. It's not just a downtown hotel. It's a place for people to gather and create memories. And I think that that's really important for our community. So as visitors from outside the community come to Calhoun County, they're coming here to take memories back of how great, Battle Creek, Marshall, Albion really are, those great memories that they take home with them. And when I talk to people around the state, they remember things like state wrestling at Kellogg Arena and staying at McKinley and going to gymnastics events as well. And more importantly, it brings money from outside our community in. So that money that is brought in helps with job creation and then gets spent over with our residents within our community. So that's the importance of the property. The overflow from a large convention space downtown is huge. It goes out to the hotels that we call Beckley Road hotels. It goes out to the Marshall hotels. And then it causes other events to also go. So if we have something going on downtown Battle Creek and Marshall has something going on, then the spill off goes to Albion and other properties as well. And as Joe said, right now, we have a lot of overflow going to other communities. It's going to Coldwater, it's going to Kalamazoo, it's going to Jackson. And in fact, if you want to get a hotel room for the weekend of June 11th and 12th, good luck, because I have staff people right now fighting over hotel rooms because we're so booked. So the hotel rooms are definitely important, but more importantly, really is that meeting space. And I think that the advantage here is that it's locally owned. And then it allows us to do things like create a hospitality training program with Grand Valley and the local schools as well. So there's a lot of benefits there as well. All right. Are there any questions?
Anybody?
Linda, I was just going to ask, I mean, obviously you have expertise as, understanding the whole tourism industry countywide. Would you say at this point, this is probably the top priority to get completed?
Absolutely. It really is the top priority. It's sort of pinnacle to not only the future, but also really keeping events that we currently have. We have events at Kellogg Arena that are booked that we've managed to keep because we keep saying, this renovation of the hotel is coming. For instance, next summer, we'll have the Jehovah's Witness group here for 4 weekends in the summer. That's going to be 5,000 people each weekend coming to an event at Kellogg Arena and then staying at the surrounding properties. So we're planning on having this property for the following years to be able to accommodate them. So it really is kind of the cornerstone for tourism within our community.
Anyone else?
I have a question, Steve. This is Derek. So this probably, I guess I could have asked Joe offline when I see him, or it's probably for Joe. Linda, you might be able to answer it too. The guy that, or the entity that ran the hotel on the ground originally, I thought still owned a portion of the building or a portion of the complex. Is that so? What is being done to maybe try to get him out of the scene? Because how I look at it is making improvements to the outside buildings, as in the one side and the other side, then you still got the middle that's dumpy. What's going on with that?
So how the scope of the project grew from the hotel to the dollar amount with the entire complex, you hit the nail on the head there. And I can't disclose too much, but we are working on obtaining that.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
You're muted, sir. Commissioner Smith, you're on.
My apologies. Sorry. This kind of dovetails on Commissioner King's comments. I think we've been hearing about this location being a DoubleTree now for 5 years. I think 2016 this first started. How is this effort any different? Who are the new players? Who are the new folks that are going to make it happen that haven't been able to in the past?
That's a great question. So we loaned dollars in I think 17 to an outside private entity to do the work. They didn't complete it. Battle Creek Unlimited filed suit against that group, not only for repayment but performance. And upon that time, because these markets are so different, cost of construction versus appraisal, the only way to pull this off is to do it locally. So it's under our control. We are going to do it under a 50 Capitol Avenue Development Corporation. So this is really a community-led effort because of the past failed attempts of the private sector.
Right. So it's owned by BCU and it will be part of the 50 Capitol Avenue company, essentially. So it will remain owned here. And that control is really critical, I think.
And to Commissioner Smith, to add on to that, we really kind of learned during the Milton process, not that there's anything wrong with the Milton, but because these markets are in transition, cost of construction versus appraisal, we always have to bring community dollars to the table get it to actually get the project done. So the thought process has changed a little bit. Why not do these projects ourselves, because we're bringing so many dollars to the table, and then keep the profits for ourselves. When I say keep the profits for ourselves, refunnel those profits back into economic development for the community, rather than letting the private developer take the dollars elsewhere.
So, and I'm sorry, Chair Frisbee, may I ask a question? I'm sorry, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Joe, so basically BCU or Capital 50 will be owning the property, and basically Hilton Doubletree is managing it?
That's a great question as well. So we are not in the business of running or operating a hotel. We would contract with a hotel operator. We have one identified right now, Suburban Inns out of Hudsonville. They own several properties, all branded throughout the state. So as far as the Hilton property, the Hilton name goes on it. You have to meet all the standards that Hilton puts out, but then we contract with an outside hotel operator to run the day-to-day operations.
And they would assure I'm going to say the standards for the 5-star to continue to be able to raise the flag for that particular, for McKenna. Okay.
One other thing that I'd like to add, if I could, on that note, this property, since it was built 40 years ago, has continually changed hands. And that's probably why it's in a state of disrepair, because nobody ever set dollars aside so that in year 5 you have $2 million or $1 million or whatever to do refreshes. So the elevators are all original. A lot of these mechanical systems are all original. So the performer that we have put together, and is why we're not over leveraging ourselves on the senior debt side, puts dollars aside so that we don't end up in a situation where in year 5 we've got to do some refresh and it's not there.
Thank you.
So Joe, you talked about the tax impact. Who's paying the taxes on it then?
So it would be a C Corp. So 50 Capitol Ave was created to be a C Corp because we want this entity to pay taxes like any private entity would. So 50 Capitol Ave would pay the taxes just like any other private entity would.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I have just one comment that's not related to this project, but it is related to tourism. And I just wanted to mention for all commissioners that another probably much smaller scale project that I think could help tourism in the county is considering helping the fairgrounds. They're sort of in transition and needing some both, short-term assistance to recover from, not being able to generate revenue last year with the shutdown, and then also longer term to boost the capacity and improve their facilities. And so they need some both short-term and long-term assistance. And, I think that there's the potential for the fairgrounds to contribute on a larger basis to the tourism within the county. And a couple of commissioners and I and Linda Freibler attended a meeting with part of the fairgrounds board this past week. So I did request that they put together what those needs might be, in that could be another investment of some of the county funds to help in that effort.
Commissioner Miller? You're muted, sir.
Yeah, okay, there we go. So you said that you filed suit on the company that borrowed money in the past. Where is that suit at, and what kind of money can you recoup from them, do you think?
So we took ownership. The result of that was we assumed ownership of the property in November of 2020, which settled the suit. So the debt just kind of transferred with the property, and we got in exchange, we obtained the hotel. So the suit's been settled.
Can you say how much money they were loan was for?
roughly the outstanding was 3.3 million. They were loaned 3.5 million.
Hmm.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right.
Steve, just
Go
to
ahead.
what Kelly just said, I thought Tommy was going to have some questions with or comments with the fair. I'm interested in hearing what the fair has to say. I mean, once again, it's hard because it seems like they're always in scramble mode for many years, up including, you know, going back a decade or so where the county had to bail them out. I don't know why it would be any different. It seems like they're changing fair managers every other year, that kind of thing. But I would be interested in hearing what they think their needs are.
Yeah, and that was part of the mission on Wednesday, was to listen. And I think I was unable to attend at the last moment. I had to go to another meeting, but Kelly and Tommy can confirm this. We expressed some of those concerns about their stability and their need for some potential changes moving ahead, including structure and institutional things that would include financial accounting and audits and things like that. So I think they heard us a little bit better this time. And we'll just wait for them to respond with what they really think they need before we move ahead with that.
And I think that I just wanted to add, I was at that meeting. I think that, you know, it's important to recognize the size of the property there, and that, you know, the property is owned by the county. Sort of unclear to me is fact how the buildings are owned and that sort of thing. But definitely, you know, the infrastructure that is there is really a great asset for our county, and I think could be leveraged for a number of other events. And, you know, so I hope that there's a consideration for some investment in maybe some of those more physical aspects there at the grounds, because again, those are owned by the county.
Thank you.
Yeah, something that the county helped out, you know, about 10 years ago, and they've come a long way. They got themselves out of financial crisis. A lot of the day-to-day operations year to year, we can run. A lot of the problems is our infrastructure. You know, you can get somebody to maybe redo a building and put their name on the front, but nobody's going to want to help pay for asphalt around the facilities, and you can't put your name on that asphalt, or, you know, run new water lines. That's deteriorating every year. A lot of buildings are deteriorating. Yes, there's been a lot of chaos, I guess, through the board, you know, for the past years. We are working on right now getting a fair amount of Grand Rapids to rewrite our bylaws, so to change it for the better. So everything's set in stone. And one of my concerns were, if we did do something like this, we'd want to make it so it can't change in 5 years, because there's new board members every year. It could be 3 to 4 new board members on there, and we wouldn't want to invest quite a bit of money into running a new water and sewer to an area that we're going to build a building, and then all of a sudden 2 years from then when it's ready to happen, oh no, we don't want to do that now, because it'd be a waste of money. So we want to take our time and make it a slow process to make sure we do it right. And Kelly had some very good input on that. You know, we've had firms that come around our county and do an audit on our buildings and our infrastructure and see what our needs, what our biggest priorities are at this time, and what in the future you can see. And I think that's a great idea, to take our time and make sure we do it right, instead of just throwing money at something that's not going to be utilized the best.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
No, go ahead, Kelly. If you want to go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to say, I was kind of hesitant to mention, I know the fairgrounds warrant a lot more detailed discussion. I think we want to do that once we get a little more information from them. And I don't want to take away of the importance of Joe and Linda's presentation, but I just wanted to mention that thought that I do think it's as Linda mentioned, it's a valuable asset that we need to think about, and there would definitely need to be financial and legal controls in place for whatever, we chose to help out with it. I think we do need, further conversation for sure at a later point.
Yeah, I was privy to be able to be at that meeting as well, and just wanted to comment the fact, as I think Kelly stated it well, that this is very preliminary talks. We were at a ground zero type situation, and I think it warrants future discussion, certainly, and it'll be interesting to see what they'll be able to provide to us going forward. But I think there is some real value in terms of having those substantive discussions going forward relative to that to the fairgrounds. So just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Yep, glad they reached out. Any other questions?
Chair
Yes.
Frisbee.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think that they are both projects that are very worthwhile, and I think they are both very important to our county. And I think if we go back to our last presentation, that it hits around that, and the things that Brian and Rochelle were speaking about after our after the, what was it called? Was it what was the name? Alice. Okay, Alice. Anyways, so I think that this is a huge piece to getting downtown back up and running, and all those family businesses that are down there. And I can't state enough that I think it's a fabulous thing, and I think we need to do something to help with the fair also. So I agree with both of those.
Also look at this hotel project and potentially the arena as a good collaborative effort potential with the city. It's their downtown, but it's our county. And I think together, if we can, put a little bit of effort into that may make some long-term sense for everybody. So one of those collaborative things we've been looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw Kelly shake her head and smile. Yes. All right. Well, Joe and Linda, thank you very much.
Thank you both very much.
Yep. And thanks for
Yes,
Linda
thank you.
participating in that event on Wednesday with the fair as well. So we'll look forward to hearing more about both, and look to see if there's something we can.
Thank you for the opportunity. And if there's any follow-up, happy to answer anything later on.
Joe, we really appreciate you working with us. This is kind of a different approach than we've had in the past.
Yeah.
And when we can partner, we love to do it. So
yeah,
absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, and just from a tourism standpoint, we appreciate BCU and their leadership on this project. Since Joe's been here, he's really helped revitalize downtown, get a lot of projects going on. I know it wasn't always a focus for BCU, but it is now. And I think Joe is a great leader for this type of project, which makes me confident that it's going to happen.
I also just wanted to say, Linda and Joe, I do agree with what you just said, and I do appreciate you guys coming. Having been in the hospitality industry here in Battle Creek, I know that this is very important for us. And so I do appreciate being a part of this, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm wishing just all success. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
thank you very much. And next we go to Calhoun County Courts, and I believe we have Chris Getting and Judge Jack Annette. Is there anybody else here? And Kate. Hi, Kate.
There she is.
So who wants to kick that off?
All right. I'm going to share my screen, and then Judge is going to chat.
Okay. Well, I think I'm going to kick it off here if I can. Chris, I think, is putting up our
you should see it now.
Bullet points there. So I'm Mike Jackinet. I'm the Chief Judge for Calhoun County, and I know most of the, at least the people who are on the screen there. And I do appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. I've been doing some other things, some orders I had to attend to here, so I've been listening on and off throughout the morning here, but I've heard enough to just let you know how humbling it is to think that there are all these different very important entities that are seeking funding, and we're just a small part of that. I think COVID has impacted the courts and the people that use the courts, which are a lot of folks out there. It's impacted us significantly. And so we are seeking some funding that I think will be helpful to the courts and to the public that we serve. But it really is an important task that you folks have to dig through all these different requests, which I think pretty much everything that I've heard is valid. So I really don't envy your task that you have there. We have, and Chris and Kate, Chris Ambrose, or Chris Getting and Kate Ambrose, who is married to Chris Ambrose. Chris is our circuit court administrator, probate court administrator, and then Kate is our district court administrator. They can speak, I think, more to the details on the different bullet points in the presentation that Chris has up on the screen there. But we really have tried to focus on things that we believe are lost revenue issues for the courts, and where we really think that COVID has hit us hard from what we do. I know it's hit everybody hard, but from what we do, there are certain areas where we've been significantly impacted negatively. And so that really is what we've done in putting this together. There are technology requests that are listed. And I'll just say I have a limited window of time to talk here because I have to leave in just a few minutes. So I'm not going to go through these point by point, but I will say that as it relates to most of the technology requests and the personnel requests that we're talking about, really in 20 and 21, we have really cut to where we are, I think, bare bones or beyond bare bones, and we're feeling the impact. And I think we're going to significantly feel the impact when we go back to what I would consider to be a full courthouse. Which, by the way, I'm hoping that we can have the doors to the Justice Center open on more than just appointment only, which is what we're at now. I'm hoping we can do that. July 1st is my target. July 6th, July 1st, in that range there. And that's going to have an impact when we open up those doors on how we are dealing with folks in this setting here. And you have to remember, with the court setting, it's just a little bit different in that we compel people to come to court. There are people that come to court because they file things and they want to be there. And then there are people that are being sued or the subject of a criminal case or a family division case who don't really want to be there at all, or jurors who may have other things that they prefer doing. And so we compel people to come to court. And so we're sensitive to that and the idea that we want to make that experience something that, even especially with the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, something that's going to be allow for them to function here with social distancing when we can, to kind of ease back into those times where I foresee us not having to deal with social distancing in the future, to have technology that is in keeping with other courts around the state and what the state court administrator's office is directing, and to dig through our jury backlog, which is, in my view, the most significant way that COVID has hit us. Chris, if she wants to just scroll through there, I know she has it on the technology requests. Some of those, if you stop right there, Chris, some of those technology requests, if you can go back up just one point there. Many of those technology requests are dealing with our systems that we use, our computer systems, and the interplay between the courtroom and the public, or the courtroom and our clerk's offices. And just getting us up to speed with where we ought to be. A number of these requests are requests that we've cut in the past because to meet our targets. But those all are, I'll leave it to Chris or Kate to jump in on the technology requests if you wish, or if there are any questions about that. Actually, looking at the time here, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and just kind of summarize everything, and then I'm going to turn it over to Chris and Kate in case I have to leave before we're done. There are budget line items here that are, I think, greatly impacted by COVID. And one that is, I think, COVID and just kind of situational is in lost revenue is our training budget. This happens to be one of those years where there's been significant legislative changes to many different case types that we handle. And I would say that in thinking about the expanse of these legislative changes, I can't think of another time other than about 25 years ago when the legislation came through that established the family division of the circuit court. This has been a significant year where there are tremendous changes in statutes that people need to be trained on, and we need to get back up to speed on, or get up to speed on. And so the thing that's interesting is our training budget was slashed essentially to zero. And this is the time where I think that we need training more than ever to deal with these changes that we have. So that's one area that I think we're feeling. We've cut to the bone, I think, on our staffing to the point where with as we come out of the pandemic and deal with some of the changes that we're doing structurally here, I think there's been a request for some temporary personnel. But there will be a need at some point, I think, for us to have some assistance in dealing with our jury trials, whether that's in the form of a visiting judge or additional personnel to deal with our jurors, or a combination of that. That I think is coming. And Chris, if you can scroll down a little bit more. Then there are also some capital improvements. A couple of those are, one of those in particular, I think is specifically related to COVID, because as I think many of you know, we made some modifications to our jury rooms, which if any of you have ever served on one of our juries in circuit court, the jury rooms that we've had are tiny. Somebody used the word cozy the other day. Cozy is being kind. They were tiny. And so what we did is we expanded those jury rooms by knocking out the wall between the two adjoining jury rooms on each side of the fourth floor, so that we have space that not only could accommodate a social distancing setting for jurors, but also, even without social distancing, it would make it a more comfortable room for jurors to be deliberating in. What that's done, which was COVID related, and making those changes, that was an improvement, but with that came an issue that we have, which is now we have limited rooms to use on the fourth floor to deal with our jury trials when we have more than one court handling jury trials at a time. So there's an opportunity there. And another issue that we have is when we have big cases come in, big capital cases where we have many jurors coming in on a jury pool. When there are breaks taken, the restrooms that are available to those jury pool members are the same restrooms that are used by the public, including family members of victims' families or defendants' families, or people that are taking one side or another on the case. And that has caused some problems in the past as well. So by adding a bathroom to that current footprint that we have in the jury assembly room, that will alleviate a lot of problems, and I think it's directly related to COVID. So there are some somebody's knocking at my door here. Those are some of the changes, and I'm going to stop talking now because I've gone on for a few minutes here. But if there are any questions that the commissioners have, I'd be happy to take those now before I have to leave. I have to leave in about 10 minutes. And if not, I can turn it over to Chris and Kate for any specifics that they might have. So are there any questions that any of you folks have? While you're thinking about your questions, let me just say one thing. I'm going to go rogue here a little bit because I think my obligation is to speak on behalf of the courts, but there is another entity in this county that I really want to put in a plug for, and that is I am hoping that the commissioners do put some real thought into some level of funding being applied to the juvenile home. To me, there's a significant need there, and that building is outdated for a lot of the services that we want to provide for the juveniles that are there. And it's that's something that I really want you to consider, along with the other requests that you're receiving. I don't know if Tori Benden or anyone has made any specific requests, but that's something that you need to consider as well.
Judge, you mentioned need for visiting judge. Are you looking at the potential of retired judges coming off retirement for short terms to come back?
Well, that's a possibility. And let me, on the issue of a visiting judge, there are a number of contexts in which that might happen. The thing that I think, so you understand how that works, is we inform the state court administrator's office on the need for a visiting judge. And then they have a pool that they will assign, and typically those are retired judges. In fact, I can't think of any visiting judges that I'm aware of that aren't retired judges that have signed up for that duty. We can make a request, I think, for specific judges that we think might be well suited for different types of cases, but yes, they're visiting judges. Yes, we can make requests. And I believe that the state court administrator's office tries to accommodate those types of requests.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments for Judge Jackinet?
Just that I would agree with what he said and what the court needs. And I can't imagine, I think this has got to be one of the most difficult areas for the county right now that you all have been trying to manage. And I really do appreciate how hard you've worked. You, all your judges, Chris and Kate, you guys are great. We really appreciate it. I really appreciate it anyways.
Well, this is a, thank you for that. And this is a public meeting. And so I do want to take the time to say, you know, it's, the staff here has been, I think, tremendous in dealing with the issues, but we've been really fortunate here with the administration, not only I think at the court level, but at the county level. The gathering of the people involved in this county to deal with these issues and the proactive nature that I think a lot of these issues have been addressed throughout this pandemic has been very strong, very helpful. So, and that not just Kelly and her people, but Eric Pessel. I mean, we've just had the sheriff, Kim Hinckley. We've had communication, Kim Archambault. I'm leaving people out accidentally because the names aren't coming to me right now, but it's just really been across the board, tremendous work that's being done, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Kate and Chris, you have more to add?
Oh, sorry. Can I ask one question before the judge has to leave? And
Absolutely.
it's just sometimes these ideas come to me, but you didn't mention the need for increased funding for the specialty courts. And I mean, I know this is one-time funding, these would be short-term, but I'm just wondering if that's also
well, I appreciate you bringing that up. That when we put together this list, I will say that our gathering of this type of various requests is being done contemporaneous with a lot of other things that are happening right now in the court. So I don't think that this is an exclusive list or that has everything that we think is important. the specialty courts have been impacted by this, and the participants in the specialty courts have been impacted by this pandemic, I think, significantly. And one area that I would like to see is potentially more funding that can go into our treatment resources for our participants. And whether that's through Summit Point or through additional line item funding with the county. I mean, those are all things that I think would be helpful. Just because it's not on this list that Chris and Kate have really put together with minimal input from me as far as the details. That is an area that I would be interested in talking about further.
Chris, Kate, you have more to add?
Nothing specific unless anyone has any questions about items on the list.
Not so far.
Was this one of those deals, Chair Frisbee, where I just talk so much that I just kind of, I hit every mark here? There's no other need for questioning?
I won't answer that question on the grounds I could incriminate myself.
I can get
Typical Michigan.
I do know that, so that's.
All right. Well thought out, and we appreciate your input today, and we'll certainly give it a great consideration moving forward. So
one thing that I am going to try to come back. I know that there's a time towards the end of the meeting for public comment, and I think Chris and Kate are going to be sticking around for that. I'm going to try to get back to that as well, but I have to take off right now. But thank you very much.
Bye.
I guess one thing I should point out is one of our items on here is the public module for OnBase, which would allow access to court records from home. Essentially, anybody could get on and request copies of records, certified copies even. We had worked with several different departments to address this several years ago, and had that quote that's in there is actually old. So that's about, I think, 5 years ago. And so that would be in conjunction with Kim Hinckley, who I just didn't have the chance to coordinate with prior to this meeting, but that would definitely involve her office as well.
So, all righty. Well, again, thanks for coming, and you're more than welcome to stick around. So next, we're going to go to financial assistance to households and businesses. That'll be Treasurer Winsauer and Deputy Treasurer Weaver. Hi, Melinda.
Hello. Thank you, Chair Frisbee. I appreciate it a whole lot. Linda and I will do a little presentation, but I just wanted to bring up one of the items that Kelly talked about, businesses. We were contacted by Art Kale regarding a business in Homer that is struggling right now because of silicone chips that are used in the process that they in their manufacturing process. I think just following the national news, we might see a lot of this maybe impacting Calhoun County businesses out at the fort. I don't know how much of it's going to be hitting us, but it's something that we've got to put on our radar. And Melinda will be touching a little bit on this on our presentation, especially the impact of small businesses that work with the bigger businesses out at the fort. It's something just to kind of keep in mind when we are looking at our presentation.
I just
Linda.
my screen. Can you guys see it?
I'm only seeing tips and tricks.
Huh.
For some reason, it's not coming up.
It was there, Melinda. Maybe you just toggled at the bottom of your screen which document to show. It was there for a second.
Well, I don't know. Let me see.
Yeah, click on it again. There you go.
Is it there now?
Yeah, and then do from the beginning.
Okay, so my camera is on the other screen, so if I'm not looking at you guys, I apologize because I'm going to look at the PowerPoint. I want to take the opportunity to thank the commissioners and the public for listening to our needs and what we've seen the last 2 years since COVID's hit, and what we anticipate that could happen at the treasurer's office, and why we're asking for some of these funds.
Hey, Melinda, can you click on from the beginning, because I'm seeing everything up at the top left, all the way over right there. Click on that. There you go. Thank you.
So basically, I first want to talk about our small businesses. We know in the community, we've heard restaurants that have closed or are struggling due to the lack of business hours that they can be open. So we're wondering what's going to be the impact for property taxes. How are they going to do with paying those? Because right now there is no property tax help for businesses, small or large. So we feel that small businesses are the heart of our town and cities, and that we need to support them in any way that we can. So we're hoping to get some funding for property taxes for that. So that's one area. The second one that we're seeing a huge trend in is probate court, and individuals that have lived with their parents for many years, and then their parents die, something happens to them, they get behind on taxes, and they're caught up in this probate court issue, and they don't own the property. They don't have the funds to go through the probate court. They don't understand it. So they're just like paying year by year so we don't foreclose on them. But we'd like to get them caught up and help them in the system to get on the right track, to get this property in their name, to get the benefit of 100% household, where they get the PRE, they get all the benefits for owning a home, and getting them the assistance they need to learn how to own a home and going forward, because we're seeing more and more individuals that fall in this category. They're living with parents, the parents deceased, and then they're just continuing to live at the home, but it's not legally theirs. So we would like to see some help with helping those individuals. And then the third thing is our senior citizens. Now we have senior millage, however, there's not really property tax help for them through that millage, and Step Forward doesn't seem to think that seniors qualify because of low income. That's not one of the qualifications for Step Forward, and Step Forward will be coming out again. And in the past, we've got over $1 million in Calhoun County for property taxes, which is very great, and we will continue to use Step Forward any way we can.
Yeah, even in the past, we were number 9, I believe, Melinda, weren't we, a couple of years ago in the state as far as using Step Forward to help property owners?
Yeah, yes, we were. And Step Forward's a great asset to have in our community, and I'm excited that they're coming back. However, they have stipulations and they don't help the people that we're asking for additional funds to help. They feel just because you're on a fixed income, that is not a hardship, and that if they were to catch you up, that you couldn't stay caught up. And unfortunately, it is kind of a hardship in our theory, as if a senior gets behind that's on a fixed income, they do have a hard time getting caught up. And if we could catch them all the way up, they could stay caught up, because most of the time they don't have a mortgage. They've lived in the house for 30 some years, so their property taxes aren't that high. But when you get 2 to 3 years behind, that's a lot of money for a senior to try to come up with. So we would like to look at that and get funding for them. And they don't sometimes qualify for DHS as well, due to the amount of income they do make. So seniors are a big heart for us. We really want to get them back on the right track and keep them in their home and get the taxes caught up for them.
Also, the asset, am I correct? There's an asset portion of the help. A lot of seniors will have assets, but they don't have liquid assets. They have fixed assets. And that's another big issue that keeps them from being able to get any financial help through some of the other programs.
And then another thing that we're seeing more and more of is veterans. And assistance is available for veterans, but they have to be 100% disabled. We have many veterans that come into our office that have fallen behind, that are maybe like 50% disabled or 40% or 60, and they can't find the help that they need to get caught up. I have worked with Aaron from VA. He is phenomenal. He's helped a couple veterans for us, and We will continue to work with him. But there are individuals that we see that don't qualify for anything. And another thing, I know the veterans law has changed this year, which is really exciting. So they don't have to apply for it every year. But if you are 100% disabled veteran and you miss 1 year, they won't retro it back. So I have veterans that could be in forfeiture status right now that are 100% disabled, and they have to pay those taxes. They can't get out of paying them. And it's hard on them. And so that's another reason why we want to make sure that they're getting the help. These veterans have served our country. We need to start serving them and helping them any way we can. And then the benefits from property taxes being paid, which most of all of you know, the whole community will win. Because if property taxes don't get paid and they come to us and we end up foreclosing on them and they don't sell at auction and get back on the tax roll, we have to do a thing in the treasurer's office called chargeback. When we do these chargebacks, what happens is entities start paying the price. And I had one of our hardship coordinators do a little survey or whatever on how much an entity gets charged back. And this is just last year. So last year we didn't have very many foreclosures. And an entity got charged back close to $6,200. But if you think about these entities, that's every school, that's every city and local unit, that's the county. The county gets money from property taxes. So, this is affecting multiple entities and the amount of money. So we want to get those taxes paid and we want to keep them on the tax roll so that revenue is continuing to come into the county and to all the entities. And that's all I really have, unless anyone has any questions. I kind of flew through my apologies.
I do have a question, Chair. Melinda, could you please explain what you said something that I had not heard? What is 100% disabled? What is meant by 100%?
I can actually jump in on that because I am a veteran, and you have to be through the Veterans Affairs designated that you meet the 100% disabled criteria. It's not something that you just go out and sign a document. They go through a rigorous thing. And I had several of my Vietnam veterans that served during the same time I did, that Agent Orange, I'm just going to use an example, Commissioner Rochelle, that had to prove that they were somehow affected by it. I had a friend that transported Agent Orange on a naval vessel. The Veterans Affairs said that this veteran, there was no way that he was on Vietnam land, therefore he couldn't have gotten around Agent Orange. That was incorrect. He was mopping it up as it spilled out of the containers that broke open on the ship. So it took a long time for him to get 100% disability. He was 50%, and they said, well, we'll give it that. But he finally proved it. But this is just some of the things that the veterans have to go to get this 100% disability. And the fight is really hard. And like I said, I'm involved with a lot of veterans. And so it is through the Veterans Affairs Commissioner that they get the actual designation of being disabled.
Yeah. Thank you. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to mention, just so that everybody kind of knows, the treasurers in the state of Michigan have gone through a lawsuit. It was Raffaele versus Oakland County on our surplus profits from our auctions. Our team has been involved in the new legislation that was passed on December 22nd of 2020, detailing the procedure for somebody to file an intention to the courts for this extra surplus. One of the things that came out of the legislation was that the treasurer is allowed to collect 5% commission, I'll call it, but it's a 5% on the sale price. So far, we have not seen a lot of stipulations of how that 5% can be used. And one of the things our team, our foreclosure prevention team, has been looking at, and this is prior to knowing about the American Rescue Plan, is setting up a fund that could help people. And this is part of what our presentation was. So what we're looking at with the American Rescue Plan is to be able to supplement this additional monies that we may be able to put into this plan using maybe a community action agency, maybe using Summit Point as professional, help me out, Melinda, what do we call them? Counselors, I guess. Yeah, counselors, or trying to think of the other word, Melinda.
Social worker, like
social workers. Thank you. I drew a blank on social workers. This is something that when the American Rescue Plan came out, if we could put these two funds together and be able to help these people, I think this would be awesome.
Mr. Chair, I have a
couple
question or
questions.
comment if I
Oh,
could.
go ahead.
please. No, sorry about that, Derek.
Go ahead.
First of all, thank you folks for the presentation today. Obviously, someone who supports small businesses, veterans, and seniors, we all have a very vested interest in making sure we take care of those folks. Certainly been hit during this process. With that being said, how much do you anticipate is approximately how much you need in funding in order to successfully take care of this, what we would call one-time funding, if you will? Yeah, you guys have an approximate?
I did put in approximate amount because I was looking at the entire funds over the next 3 years, and that would be 1.5 million.
Yep.
Okay, and from that, I think, Brian, you might have answered this question, but I'll go ahead and ask it again, and then you can tell me whether you already answered it or not. Obviously, you guys know this is one-time funding, and obviously going forward, this program will gain certainly a lot of attention in terms of people. You know, you may have folks that become, let's say, repeats, if you will. You'll get them paid up and then they fall right back into the same cycle again. So how do you anticipate from a long-term keeping this type of program sustained over a long term in terms of help these folks?
That's actually the 5%. That was part of why I brought up the 5% from our, I call it commission or sales commission or whatever it is. That's the sustaining part of it. What I'd like to see us do is start off with funding through helping, through Community Action Agency or Summit Point, but we need to have a follow-up program. Many of you are maybe not familiar with a program that's operated downtown. It's the Financial Opportunity Center managed by Goodwill Industries. But they have a financial way where they help through using Kellogg Community College, Omni Credit Union to help people set up a banking to teach them how to manage their money. One of the things that has been successful is the follow-up part. Instead of just say, here it is, now you're on your own. This is the part that our team in the forfeiture portion or the delinquent portion of the process before it becomes foreclosure is to work with people. We knock on every one of these doors, our team does. What if we have a means of being able to, we can see, like, I know for a fact we knocked on a door of an elderly lady that lived in a mobile home, and she was heating it with propane tanks. The ceilings were falling in. She had lost her husband, lost her grandchild or child that year or the year before, and she didn't want to leave. We reached out, but I don't know if we were reaching out to the right areas because she may not have met some of the criteria again. This is where this fund, and I'd like it to be a perpetual fund where they would pay it back, but be able to work towards a payment plan. We're looking at all kinds of ideas, Commissioner Tompkins, that I think that would be appropriate to maintain this on an ongoing basis. I'm looking at the American Rescue Plan to get it started. I have all kinds of ways, if not even with our investment income, hopefully it'll even get a little bit better than the 0.45% that we're making on the money right now. I think it's almost 35 million that we're getting 0.45% interest. Nobody in the state of Michigan is getting that kind of money today. That interest can be reinvested. I've already had a lot of discussion on, is that interest restricted? No, it's not. The interest can be used. So there's some things, creative things that I think we're going to be looking at. And this is just the start, like today's meeting. This is a start to open up our eyes.
I'd like to add something too,
Sure.
Commissioner Tompkins. I believe what we'll do going forward is some type of case management with these individuals. We have a strong forfeiture foreclosure team that works really well. And I think we'll have to do some case management with them because we don't want them to be repeaters. We want them to succeed. We want them to stay in their home. We want them to understand what property taxes do for the community and why it's so important that they pay them. It's more than just the government's taxing you. There's many benefits from the taxes getting paid on time for the individual as well. So there'll be some case management with each one. We definitely have the staff and we can do that. And we have the resources to provide them with that.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Commissioner King.
Thank you. So to be foreclosed on, you're talking about 3 years of delinquency, right?
That is correct.
And what level are we at this year? I thought you reported earlier that we're at like a historic low, at least.
Yes, we are.
Last
For the
several
last
years.
5 years. That is correct.
Okay. My other
What I'm
point
looking at,
is,
but you're looking at foreclosure,
Hold on.
Commissioner King.
hold on,
Oh,
hold
okay.
on. So I'm glad that the foreclosures are low. I know it's 3 years behind. I guess my question is, every single one of these folks, I would dare to say, just got given more money by the government than they've ever been given before. And now we should give them more. I feel sorry for the seniors and veterans and such. And I would like to be able to maybe carve them out and have, if something like this goes through, have a committee that looks at this, but just a carte blanche give somebody that is being foreclosed on these dollars when they've been given more money this year than they ever have. I don't know. It doesn't seem to make sense to me.
I agree wholeheartedly with you. And we've seen a lot of those individuals come in and pay up some of those taxes with their money.
Yes.
We did a lot more hardship extensions this year than we've done in the past due to the fact that of COVID and them not working. And yes, some of them were getting unemployment, we're getting the extra money, but some of these individuals like seniors weren't getting the unemployment. And I know you support them, but I wholeheartedly agree. And when we first brought this to Kelly's attention about asking for money and stuff we wanted, we did talk about maybe getting a committee together that have commissioners on it, have individuals on it. They have to fill out an application, and that decision is made as the committee of who gets help in the next 3 years. And it's not made just by our department or another entity. I think that's a great idea to have a committee involved to help make those decisions. So I appreciate
Linda,
your concern.
one of the things I don't think everybody listening today understands, foreclosure and forfeiture. Our forfeitures are still about what, I think it was 9.6 million this year.
No,
That
you're talking about delinquent. What
delinquent and for forfeiture before it becomes foreclosure is what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Those are the people that we want to reach out to, not just the ones that are foreclosing. We want to help those that are coming over delinquent. We've seen more delinquent coming over than we've seen in a long time. Am I correct on that? Delinquent wise versus forfeiture?
Yes, it was a little up this year.
Yeah.
All right. So we're now cutting into Krista's time. Is there any other questions for the treasurer?
I just want to make a comment. I definitely support some sort of assistance for all of these individuals and businesses related to the COVID impact on, their ability to pay taxes. I'm trying to get clarification. I will follow up with Brian and Melinda, but I've been asking Treasury and NACO for some advice on how to structure such a program, because I don't think that we would be allowed to, for example, simply forgive the taxes or pay the local units directly the property taxes. And I don't think we want to just give them cash and hope they make their property tax payments. So there's going to be a little bit of creativity here in structuring this. I just think we need to work out the details and figure out how to do it in a way that makes sense. But I think there's an opportunity there for one time get people caught up, and especially that example of the business in Homer.
Yeah.
Thanks for your presentation, and we're going to have to move along so that Krista gets her time allotment as well. We look forward to hearing her. Thanks, Brian and Melinda.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for allowing me this opportunity to present. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you see the first slide there? All right. So I'm Krista Trout-Edwards. I am the director of the Calhoun County Land Bank Authority. I'm going to talk a little bit about housing and its companion, land reutilization. I am not making a specific ask today. This is really under leveraging funds and partnerships in our community with the ARPA money and some opportunities for the county. And so I'm going to start out just kind of outlining where this work would fall under ARPA, and then giving some background on housing in our community and kind of the changes under COVID. So I'm going to talk a little bit about pre-COVID conditions, what we're hearing now, opportunities through the Land Bank Authority, and what's been going on in our community through conversations that I've been having with the cities of Battle Creek, Albion, and then some recent conversations I've had with some of our state leaders and their interest in hearing where the county sits on this subject. So ARPA definitely speaks to affordable housing. I've just kind of pulled out some language. I don't want to read all of this to you, but if you go through the legislation, it talks about building stronger communities and specifically addresses supportive housing for homeless populations and unhoused populations. It talks specifically about affordable housing and increasing the supply of affordable housing, as well as some housing related services such as housing vouchers, residential counseling, navigation systems, and then increasing the economic opportunity for residents that are living in areas of concentrated poverty, which I think is really important. The other thing that I thought was really important as you read through this is really addressing systemic public health and economic challenges that are affecting certain populations in our community. And that's something I thought just crept up a lot throughout the legislation, and I think is a good thing to keep in mind as we consider how this money is spent. And another thing that came up, and it's come up in this conversation around housing and what our neighborhoods look like and well-being, is that you can spend the money on healthy living environments around mental and physical wellness. So when you think about the number of vacant lots and what they're being used for, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, that's where I believe physical wellness might come in. Remediation of lead and other hazards is also addressed in the legislation. And then eviction prevention, homelessness, home repair, weatherization, job training. Some of those currently have money going into them, as Chris Sargent mentioned earlier. Job training is a really big thing right now in our community, and I'm going to talk about that as well. So what was the housing industry and arena like pre-COVID? Well, thankfully, the Michigan State Housing Development Corporation did a housing study in Michigan in 2019. So we have some really great data about where housing stood in 2019 pre-pandemic. And some of the things that MSHDA found was that our housing stock was old and that it was primarily single family residential. And that's true across the state and definitely true in Calhoun County. So they found that the units that were available were not laid out the way that current buyers are looking for, that it was aged, that there was deferred maintenance. They also found that communities that had demand at that time we're seeing prices rise. So prices were escalating even before the pandemic, and that there was a shortage was happening in many communities, that there were regulatory barriers around zoning, and that development processes were taking longer. They found that when new opportunities around employment were moving into communities, that housing was often behind. So new jobs and new housing were not really coinciding. So that was also exacerbating the housing shortage. And then another, I think, important aspect of the findings was that there was a combination. There were stricter lending practices post-recession, but there was also more debt load for people. So the ability to actually purchase housing was becoming more difficult for most folks because they were carrying a larger debt load, and there was a shorter supply and prices were going up. So this was all pre-pandemic. And I just went in and grabbed some headlines from the Battle Creek Inquirer over the last couple of years just to sort of refresh everybody's memory. We've had several articles about affordable housing. We have a couple of projects that were slated for downtown, mostly apartments for affordable housing. And then there is this concern of what's going to happen when the moratoriums on eviction and mortgage foreclosure end. I mean, that's definitely a big question out there. We don't know yet, but that's a question. And then this gap in affordable housing in our community has been pointed to as one of the biggest issues in our community pre-pandemic. So what's happening today? You know, we're in 2021. We've lived our first year of a pandemic. So what's going on? A recent article in Bridge Magazine told us that housing prices have jumped 13% across the state in 2020. But in Southwest Michigan, that gain on sales was more like 25%. So yes, definitely housing prices are increasing. We also have seen the number of houses on the market decrease. So there are less homes for sale right now if you're on the market. We've seen the real estate tax collections go up, which you would expect because house prices are going up. And as I mentioned, there's this concern about what's going to happen when the evictions end, and we really don't know yet. But in that same article in Bridge Magazine, they did have some data about foreclosure, and it showed that 5.1% of Michigan homeowners are behind on their mortgage payments right now, which is lower than 42 other states. So that was a bit of good news that we're keeping an eye on. But we just really we're just watching it because we need to see what's happening. This was a table that came to me from the Center for Community Progress. The other thing that we're watching is that after the recession in 2008, the unemployment numbers were very similar to what they are now, but the vacancy in residential and commercial structures really didn't happen until a few years later. So you can see here, I'll point with my pointer here, unemployment, kind of peaked 2008, 2009, but vacancy didn't peak until 2013. So there was a lag in between unemployment and housing vacancy. And this is the residential and this is the business. And you can see the vacancy and the business peaked at the same time. So that's something that we're concerned about, we're keeping an eye on. But as others have alluded to, we have some other tools that are available right now. There are stimulus payments, there are mortgage foreclosure prevention programs, there has been this moratorium. So those are some tools that are available this time around that weren't available in the recession. So it's just something that, we know from 2008 to 2013 that there was this trend. So we need to keep an eye on it so that we're making sure that, if folks are getting in trouble, that we're available to help them. That doesn't help the overall housing prices, but it does help us understand and be prepared to help folks that might be getting into trouble. So what does that mean for housing starts? Well, under the ARPA legislation, it actually tells us which census tracts we're allowed to spend money in. And this is really geared towards helping those folks that were most affected by the pandemic. So those folks living in those areas with lower median incomes and higher poverty rates. So these are those maps. This is the city of Battle Creek and the city or Emmett Township. And just to give you some perspective, this is the Washington Heights area. This is the Coburn area. This is the Post Franklin area. And this is Fremont McKinley. This is Emmett Township. So you've got your Brownlee Park area here. And then this is the city of Albion. And you've got your west side of the city of Albion here, and this is Albion College, and this is the eastern side, and it's not in a qualified census tract. Now, based on some conversations I've had with the Land Bank Association at the national level, it seems like there might be some ability to work in areas outside if you can tie it to a COVID related negative impact. But I just wanted to explain this. We're very used to working in qualified census tracts. And I also wanted to show these maps because land bank properties align very well with these maps. This next map is of the city of Battle Creek. These are the 4 core neighborhoods around the city of Battle Creek. We call them our NPCs, neighborhood planning councils. So again, the Washington Heights neighborhood, Coburn, Fremont McKinley, and the Post Franklin neighborhood. And the numbers in purple and these circles here, these are the number of combined vacant lots owned by the Land Bank Authority and the city of Battle Creek. And I used this map earlier this week because we participated in a federal roundtable around housing with the city. And so there are quite a number of vacant lots where you could actually do some affordable housing developments in the city. And I do not have a map of the city of Albion, but we also own a number of vacant lots on the western side of the city of Albion. So there's the same potential in that community as well. And I just think this is really a strong indicator of how much opportunity there is under these funds to connect on affordable housing in our community. So right now we have about 500 vacant lots in the city of Battle Creek itself. We do a lot of activation around vacant lots, but when you have that type of number, you're not going to be able to do an activation through a side lot program or a pop-up art or a garden on every single one. So we, back in 2018, started looking at what could our sites accommodate. We like to talk about the development ecosystem, in part because we've been trying to figure out how we can help support folks who want to develop on our properties be successful. We get a lot of interest in building on our properties, but we have a lot of folks who have trouble getting from A to Z because there are just hurdles. You know, they have trouble getting from A to Z. And sometimes it's around building costs, sometimes it's around house design. Sometimes there are other issues. And so we worked with the Incremental Development Alliance in 2018 and 2019 to really understand and bring some training in for folks who we were calling small scale developers so that they could have an opportunity to invest in our community, build some wealth, invest in their neighborhoods, and keep that wealth in our community. And also look at some other housing styles so that we could offer some different housing styles besides single family residential. So over here, we have what we call an ADU, which is an accessory dwelling unit. So this is a single family home with an accessory dwelling unit. It's a mortgage helper. You have your house here, you have a rental in the back. So you have another income stream and it helps offset your mortgage payment. And then this is just a little bit of a larger one on this lot here. Over here, we have a single family home and a flexible workspace, which was interesting in 2018, but sounds really great in 2021, as we all have been working from home. And when we were doing this, we were also working closely with the city of Albion, who was updating their zoning ordinance, because that's part of the ecosystem. Can you actually build this type of housing in your community? You know, does the zoning allow for it? So we did a lot of work there, and we've had similar conversations with the city of Battle Creek. Another type of housing that we looked at was smaller cottage style homes. And the reason that this type of housing is interesting is because some folks really don't want the maintenance, and some folks don't have the buying power to buy a larger home, but a smaller home like this is a really great fit because it becomes a wealth asset for someone. And if they can buy a smaller home, they can build wealth for themselves and then sell it and purchase something else in the future. So this is another really great option. And so as we were going through this federal roundtable with the city of Battle Creek this week, I really started thinking about this presentation, the overall ecosystem, the potential to leverage funding, the land bank's role, and the role of other organizations in our community in housing. And there's lots of roles and there's lots of potential for partnerships and collaboration. The land bank does a lot of things, but we don't do everything. You know, we do a lot of site development and acquisition, and then we have some emerging CDCs in the city of Battle Creek that really want an active role. And that's what the city of Battle Creek is looking at. How can they build the CDC capacity to offer more housing services, particularly around counseling and other services for that community. And I kind of came up with this, you know, overall thought that, you know, here are the things that we're missing. You know, we don't have a ton of financial education for homeowners. You know, the treasurer's office does a ton of foreclosure prevention, and they've also layered in some financial education through their own program. So we've got that. But NIBC used to do a lot of counseling, and now they do a partnership counseling through an organization in Kalamazoo. So that's one area that I think could be built up in our community. We also don't have a lot of mortgage products in our community through NIBC like we used to. We don't have a comprehensive vacant land use strategy, which would help us promote infill development. We don't have design plans for our houses, which is, I think, one way we could lower overall development cost. We don't have gap financing, and it's really very similar to what Joe said earlier in his plan. We can build a house, but what we can sell it for, there's a gap in our community right now. We have an appraisal gap. It doesn't, no matter how we approach this math equation, right now there's an appraisal gap. And so that's something that's significant. And then workforce, you know, we have a shortage in the construction trades, and a workforce development program would be helpful on many fronts. It would help us actually have contractors who could do the work, but it would help us with unemployment numbers and skills trade and, you know, wealth generation for folks in our community. So why would we want to do this? Why is it important to use this money in this way? Well, number one, it would bring underutilized properties back into productive use. It would put properties back on the tax roll at a higher value. So it would actually increase our overall tax base. So all of those entities that Melinda said, you know, don't get taxes when they charge back, would actually get more taxes because we would have more value on our rolls. But it would create a range of housing choices for folks in our community that would be at a diversity of price points. So more folks would have a chance to be active in our housing arena. Folks would also build wealth for themselves and for their families. And there could be potential for new partnerships and revenue streams. And then there would be a lot of capacity building, hopefully for small scale developers, CDCs, and for contractors. This photo here at the bottom is just a range of housing styles that our community could support, everything from the ADU to small apartment houses. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that we have been working on with the Kellogg Foundation and their consultant in the city of Battle Creek. This is under the scope of land assembly and infill. This is McKinley Street in Battle Creek. We own 5 properties. When I say we, it's the Land Bank Authority. We have done a lot of work on McKinley over the years. It's part of the NSP target neighborhood. And the Kellogg Foundation was interested in doing an attainable housing study and kind of picked several clusters in this neighborhood. We landed on this particular block because of the number of lots that the land bank owned. We already have money to do some of the steps of the housing infill here. Like we can do the environmental work, we can clear the title, and we can do some of the beautification work. So what it kind of boils down to is that you could do housing on 1, 2, 3, and 4. But on lot number 5, we would do a beautification because this is commercial and this is residential, and we would want a barrier in between the residential and commercial. It's kind of a rough transition, and it would make more sense to do a soft transition between these two. There's been a lot of investment in the area already, but this particular block has continued to struggle. The other thing, in case you're wondering what 42 means over here in strategic value, is that this particular project has been scored in the city's consolidated plan. So they have a matrix to score projects. So this went through that scoring process. A 40 is a very good score. So this project got a very good score. So it's not just us saying we think it's a good idea. It's been formally scored in the city's scoring process. So what else is going on McKinley Avenue? The red circles represent private investment through a land bank program called Transform This Home, where we sold to private buyers and they rehabilitated those projects. So one of them is done, the other one is almost done. So we've already had some private investment. And just a couple of interesting things about the neighborhood is that, you know, it's very diverse. We've got a lot of single family homes. We've got some owner occupied at 36%. We've got some vacancy and it's older housing stock. So very much like you would find in other parts of our community. Now I'm going to show you a really high number, and it's an inflated housing cost because of COVID in part. So at the end of the day, the contractors came back that a 1,400 square foot home would cost $320,000, which is very high, and it has to do with construction costs and the price of wood, and that a subsidy would be $173,000. This does not include any home buyer subsidy, and it doesn't include increasing density on the lots, like if you were going to build a higher density home, a 2-family or an ADU or something like that. So how do we get that down? And we do want to get it down, right? It's too much. There's a couple of ways that we think that we can get it down, and a couple of very good reasons we want to get it down. You know, number one, the individual buying power for residents in our community, it's constrained. This isn't something that they could afford. So that's not going to work for us. And so what we think we could do is create a land activation strategy to really highlight those properties that make sense for infill, and create a house design pattern book. So streamline that design on the houses so that we know that we're building them efficiently. We also have been working with some other developers who are building houses or looking to build houses around the 1,100 to 1,200 square feet mark, and they're coming in smaller, and they're really creative designs that are flexible. And I think that that's really where we want to hang our hats right now for design styles. I think also, you know, supporting the city in their endeavor around CDC development makes sense, because there are some additional services that really just need to happen in our community to help folks be able to afford properties and understand properties. So that's another place that we can spend some of these assets to help. And then this pilot workforce development program is also another really important component. We have a staff member who participates in the Home Builders Association. And this week we heard 2 really important things from a meeting that association had. The first one was that the area realtors, Battle Creek area realtors, said that there really aren't very many houses for sale and they can't keep them on the market, and that the sweet spot for housing prices in our community is from 100 to 200,000. So that's really important when we're thinking about where we're placing houses on the market in our community. The second is that the tariffs on the soft lumber is that's what's really driving up the prices for construction. And so the Home Builders Association is working on that issue for us in general. And they're also saying that they need to double the number of the workforce in order to meet the demand, to keep up with not just the demand, but the retirement in the field. And that's something that we've definitely seen when we're trying to bid out jobs. We're just not getting, you know, very many bids. So at our federal roundtable this week, the workforce came up, and that's not something I think the land bank needs to run, but I'm bringing it to your attention because there are other folks in our community working on it. And I think the land bank holds a piece in that we have properties that could potentially be used as an asset in that type of program. And if folks are building houses, then by all means, that's something that we could offer to help train. And then the other thing that came out of that is that MISTA is very interested in knowing where the county lands on this particular item, because they would be interested in potentially talking more to us about it and where we'd like to go, because they have some of their own goals around housing in the state. So I just wanted to put that out there as an offer to you, that they would be interested in talking. So overall, I think, you know, for me, the next steps is I'm hoping that this is a first conversation that we're having today, and that, you know, we can consider some of these short-term options to to do over the next course, and then, create kind of a plan around what we could do for housing with some of our other partners in the community.
Awesome, Krista. Thanks for the presentation. Any questions, comments for Krista? All right. Well done. Good stuff.
I just want to add one comment at the end of this, which is I think this is one of those investments that has a tremendous opportunity for return on investment, particularly if we could leverage state and federal funding. Because when you see those really large numbers, it's just a huge barrier. Like, why would we want to invest so much money into, such a small area? But the fact that, the state's interested, the city of Battle Creek's interested, our local foundations are interested. This is another one where there's a tremendous opportunity to just be a contributing partner and not have to, be the sole funder, I guess. So
I would, just to add to that, Kelly, on that call with the roundtables, when the state said they were interested, the Fed said that they were interested too. So I think that there's a real leveraging opportunity here.
Krista, a lot of this would require some zoning changes, correct? Because you go from single family dwelling on one lot to more than one.
Yeah, we've already been working on that though. We have done a ton of work in the city of Albion, and we've laid some groundwork in the city of Battle Creek. So even though the city of Battle Creek still has a lot of R1 zoning, they have some special uses around things like the ADUs, and they have some, I don't totally understand how you can short circuit it. It's not really short circuit, I shouldn't say that, but there is a process, I've been assured. I do think it's going to require some neighborhood planning and some neighborhood input, because folks are going to need to be comfortable with this, and so we're going to have to pay attention to that. And that's what we talked about a little bit at our federal roundtable. How do we do that? So yes, there would be some more work that would need to be done, but as I said, not all vacant lots are created equal, and some lots are going to lend themselves to that type of development more. And that's why I think this first item on my list, this activation strategy, makes a lot of sense, because it will help us prioritize those sites that make the most sense for those types of developments.
So that'd be one of my comments, is even though you have a vacant lots, you may have people that have a big enough lot to say, well, I want to do that too.
And that's
that own their own home already and could sell it themselves.
100%. I mean, if somebody wanted to buy one of our properties and do this, they can do that under the Develop This Lot program right now. And we actually have a handful of folks that are in option agreements with us and purchase agreements with us looking to develop. And that's great. We want them to do that. And we're using our EPA grant as an incentive for those folks. But we are hoping that we can jumpstart some of this and get other folks invested in it. But, when Joe was talking earlier and he said, doing some of this ourselves and building this capacity locally, I agree with him. We do need to have this capacity locally and keep this money here and help folks invest in our own community and our own neighborhood, so we can keep this wealth here and have the capacity and the contractors and keep that momentum going, so that it just doesn't drop off when the money is gone.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Jake, I just want to first thank Krista for everything. That was a great presentation. I really appreciate the time and the diligence you put into it. And just add a comment that, in my own experience, buying a home in Battle Creek, and then, friends my age, I guess, in the early 30s and whatnot, the market is just terribly tight here. And I'm sure that's replicable in Albion. So I really appreciate the effort you're putting behind this, because it's an issue getting folks to come to Battle Creek and stay in the area. If they can't afford something north of $200,000 and they don't want to live in something south of 60, there's just not a lot to offer in the area. So I really appreciate the work on this front and look forward to more.
Thank you. Anyone? All right. Thank you, Krista. our next section is citizens' time. The next item, during citizens' time, the board chair shall recognize any person wishing to address the board. A person recognized by the chair shall call in and state his or her name and community of residence. A person may address the board only once on the same matter during the citizens' time, and only are on matters that are relevant to county government. The chair shall control the length of time each person is allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes, and shall not allow negative personal comments. Please mute your TV or your computer when calling in, as there's background sound will be generated in feedback. Is there anyone who would like to address their commissioners? Anyone in the queue? Is there anyone that would like to address their commissioners? Okay. I have one with her hand up, Kathy Wilson.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hi. Can I
lot of
speak
feedback.
right now?
Yep, you're live, but you have some feedback.
All right. I just hung up from the phone. I wasn't sure if I had to do that, if I could do it through Zoom. So good morning, everyone. My name is Kathy Zenda Wilson. I am co-executive director of BC Pulse. I'm also co-director of our local Great Start Collaborative and Ward 4 City Commissioner in Battle Creek. This morning has been really insightful and helpful for me to see the context and to see alignment with the work that we're doing in early childhood. So I'm here today to lift up a few things. First of all, during the pandemic, the majority of those deemed essential workers were women, including the overwhelmingly female childcare workforce, who are disproportionately women of color, whose personal risks on the front lines allowed parents to work. The incredible strength it takes to simultaneously support children and the economy is finally being acknowledged. And we think that it's important to note, excuse me, that childcare programs don't obey the classic rules of supply and demand. Many experts consider the sector a failed market. Parents are already tapped out, but the obscene prices they pay don't come close to covering the true cost of care in such a personnel-heavy enterprise. Only programs serving the most affluent can reasonably charge more to boost wages. It's important also as context that a study of childcare teacher turnover in Louisiana in the Journal of Educational Evaluation and Policy Analysis found that more than 44% of teachers in private childcare programs leave every year, nearly all exiting the profession altogether. By comparison, only 16% of K-12 teachers leave each year, and typically just to go to a different school. What I'd like to lift up is that I see a lot of alignment with what the priorities are that the county is talking about when it comes to especially supporting essential workers in our shared community. And I'd like to just reiterate that childcare is a critical part of the infrastructure that supports our local economy by supporting parents as they get back to work. And most regions, including Calhoun County, face critical childcare capacity issues that could undermine this recovery, and providing a wage supplement to those professionals will support the stability of the sector on which the recovery will be built. So we'd suggest that the county consider where childcare, supporting those workers in childcare, not supporting childcare itself, but those workers as a workforce who are essential and critical and woefully underpaid, is going to be important for us. They have sacrificed their own health and well-being to maintain the essential services of childcare in our communities throughout these last 14 months. And as parents get back to work in these coming months and are leaving their homes more often, so not just the essential workers, we are seeing that we have an incredible need, and we have to make sure that we're shoring up that special work. So I'd welcome any questions anybody has, and I am available if anybody wants to reach out to me personally. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kathy. Anybody else who would like to address our commissioners? Anyone in the queue? One last time, anyone like to address their commissioners? All right, we will move on. Commissioner discussion on priorities. Kelly, do you want to lead this or?
This is really just meant to, after you've listened to all of the presentations today and some of the sort of broad spending or investment rules for the funds, this is really just, meant for open discussion. Any reflection, thoughts, comments, anything the commissioners heard that you would like to talk about, really supporting, any concerns you may have with any of the ideas we mentioned. That's just kind of a free conversation to end the session today.
Anyone? Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I want to thank everybody who spoke to us today. It was really great hearing from everybody, and I appreciate the work that everybody has put in considering, the task at hand here. So I really appreciate the time. Just two things I want to mention, and Kelly alluded to the first thing early on when we were getting going here about some of the more long-term investment, I guess, heavy issues we've kind of been pushing off for the past several years, just because, it's not every day we get a lump sum, 26 million bucks, 13 million bucks, whatever it is. And one of the things I really want to circle back to that's been an issue for some time, and I know it's pretty inefficient, is the condition of the road department garage. Just want to keep that on everybody's mind. There's never going to be a perfect time to spend that type of money on such a thing, but ever since I've been on this board, that facility has been an issue, and it's something that we can't keep throwing good money after bad. So that's one thing. And then second, Krista touched on it a little bit. I think Joe maybe mentioned it a little bit as well too. Workforce development. It's obviously more of a long-term concern and something that, isn't as tangible as roads and buildings and a lot of the infrastructure that we could, broadband as well, a lot of the infrastructure that we could put some of these funds into. But I think workforce development is something we should keep our eye on as well and look for opportunities to invest on that front. And I'll just leave it at that. Those are my comments. And again, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller.
I think, Kelly, for putting this on. I think it's very informal. A couple questions like the presentation from for the hotel there. That's in the state of Battle Creek, and the city of Battle Creek's going to have a lot more revenue than we are on this. Is there any discussion on, have they talked to Battle Creek City about help there also, or, even this housing presentation, in the city of Albion and Battle Creek, both, are they willing to partner with us to help us out? Because we're countywide, and we got to really be careful on how we spend this money. And I think it's a great morning. I mean, we had a lot of information, and we have a lot of options to go to, but there's a lot of people, I don't know how to say it. It wouldn't be necessarily people, but it'd be organizations that are in need of our assistance. And so
I will say the cities of Battle Creek and Albion were mentioned in both of those presentations as potential partners, and absolutely. And like I said, we're meeting with the city managers and mayors a week from today, and we'll be talking about big projects like that will absolutely require collaboration.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, Chair. Commissioner Hatch here. Yes, I just wanted to take the time also to say that I appreciate everyone's presentations, and it was very informative. I found Melinda and Brian, the treasurer's reports and the work that they do to be quite commendable, because there's nothing more important than keeping our constituents and our citizens in their homes, and everyone and housing, and the importance of housing. And I do see their work and what they're doing and their need very important, because I don't believe that even though it is taxes, COVID, we haven't been suffering with COVID for the last 3 years. So if anyone has, taxes or is in could be losing their home because of that, this is an opportunity to assist them. So I like that ideal. I like the thought of assisting our veterans and also our seniors, because this has been, COVID did add something and take something away from those households and from their incomes, regardless to, anything that they may have been handed down or any handouts that may have been received. They still are in need of help. So I do appreciate that. And I just wanted to say thank you to Melinda and Brian for just door to door during COVID and door to door anytime is a great feat. So just wanted to say how much I appreciate their efforts.
Anybody else? Commissioner King.
Thank you. So, hold on just a second. So, I love the presentations. It's not every day we get this kind of money. I think it needs to be used in a way that we can't be throwing money at problems. That normally is not a good idea. So we need to be very very thoughtful about how we do this. Some of the things that were not brought up were that, or at least I don't think I heard much about it, was how can we use these dollars for mental health? I think even as it relates to some of the problems we have here locally with foreclosures and veterans and some seniors and that kind of thing is the mental health problem. I think that could be a root cause for some of this stuff. I heard somebody talk about, houses being unsanitary and that. Those are, that too could be mental health related. As it relates to projects, like Commissioner Miller's right, the McCamley hotels there is in the city, but I mean, that has an impact on the entire county. I mean, when we have wrestling and volleyball and baseball tournaments, and they're pulling from all over the county. They're putting, the hotel rooms, MIS, when there's an MIS race, we normally have hotels full here because of it. I absolutely hear where he's coming from. I did actually send a message to Joe and ask him, if there's conversations with the city. There absolutely is. They're going to put a nice, the preliminary, is that they're going to definitely help out as well using their dollars. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. As it relates to the treasurer's office, I think the programs to try to keep people from being foreclosed would be great. However, I do think that there should be collaboration, like Brian mentioned, Goodwill. I think we should work together. If I would hate to think that when Goodwill's having some sort of a class about financial management and that kind of thing, it starts with, if you take on a bill, you need to pay your bill. So I would just want to make sure that it's not redundant to where we're doing some of the same things. And, then we also heard from Chris Sargent and the Alice report and that kind of thing. And there again, some of those programs are very, very grassroots, where I think it could really have a good impact for forever. If we could, teach these folks, some of the programs they do are teaching people to read, right? Or funding reading programs. Well, we already know that I think 90% of the prison population is not proficient in reading in the 3rd grade. So those are all important things that we got to stay focused on. And I know we're not spending the money today. I love this conversation. We heard from a lot of good people, and I'm looking forward to having another one to when we really start putting a pencil to paper and decide where this money's going to go.
Thank you. Mr. Merrill, do you have another comment? Your hand's still up. All right.
Yeah, sorry.
Anybody else?
If I may, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, again, I think echoing everybody's comments regarding thanking each one of the participants today in their presentations. Certainly gave us a lot of food for thought. Kind of going forward, I mean, some of these obviously are symptomatic or band-aids to some symptoms of problems that certainly need a much more deeper root cause analysis to be able to really determine what these underlying problems are going forward. But I would certainly echo also Commissioner King in terms of looking forward to maybe an additional opportunity to hear from some other folks as well, maybe with an additional another meeting if we could at some point in time. That might be beneficial for us as we get a more broad perspective from different things. I think one of the things that we also need to focus on is to your point, and I think Commissioner Miller stated it, Commissioner King also kind of echoed that as well, is whatever we decide, we want to make sure that it is a countywide impact, certainly across the board going forward, because everybody that is going to be involved in this process across the board. And then, let's see, do I have anything else here? Just some general comments that make going forward. But again, I think I'll be looking forward to, as Commissioner King as well stated, looking forward to, as we put these to pencil to paper and get some more approximate figures in terms of what some of these potential programs or requests will envision on a dollar amount, and then being able to finalize this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. We do have one more meeting scheduled right now, but that is with the township supervisors and road department. So that is another way to look at some collaborative efforts with some of these funds potentially, which would be more detailed towards obviously roads, infrastructure, that kind of stuff. So I think that's an important meeting, and that's coming up, I think, next week, Kelly.
About a week and a half. It's the 8th.
Okay. So be sitting in on that. I'm sure that some of you will as well. I think there's a lot of good opportunity that maybe we can create some environment where locals who don't normally have a lot of opportunity to do local road programs may be able to do something. So, but we need to hear from them, and are they willing and able? I heard some themes developing that I think are interesting. The improvement in maintenance of, like I said, the bond rating before, technology opportunities, especially those that enhance our community's ability to do online and access information quickly in a more timely manner where they don't necessarily have to come in. But yet I think we need to maintain the ability for folks to come in too, and maybe make some impacts where we haven't been able to impact everything that we want to do in technology. So I see a theme kind of developing there that I think would have a lasting impact. And we're all going to decide this together, and certainly administration is going to present the plan to us in the final versions. We have to approve in a vote for spending plans. So I'm thankful for their time today, not only everybody who presented, but Kelly and her staff that took the time to put all of this together today and give us the opportunity to hear and express, and we'll keep moving forward. So any other comments?
One correction, the road department meeting, sorry, is June 15, not the 8th. I was a week off. So it's
15. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Hey, Chair.
Did you have something?
Yeah, just on the road department, pardon me, the road funding note. Do you know, is there any amount of flexibility coming from Lansing in terms of how we can use that in conjunction with like the PA2 restraints? I just want to know if there's any more flexibility or if we're going to have to spend this money in conjunction with townships as we would as if, under normal circumstances, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that I'm hearing, there'll be no alternates, if you will. It'll be within the Act 51 provisions, which doesn't, so.
Yeah, it doesn't lend itself too well to the situation we have here.
No.
All right. Well, thank you.
Kelly?
Chair Frisbee,
Yes.
totally off subject, but so not only did you get, I think it's an email from me, but so did Derek and Tommy. So I don't know if everybody else did on the meeting here, but if I sent you a meeting about, or an email, excuse me, about meeting with me, anyways, it's not me. I don't know if any more of you got it.
I'm having fun responding to them right now. They just need 7 Visa gift cards for $100 a piece.
Be careful.
Oh,
They're full
am
of,
I going to get the gift card?
one of the tricks of the trade is hover over the respond to who sent it, and you'll figure out that it's not from Kathy Sue. So sometimes you open those and respond and you open yourself to malware. So be careful.
Thank you.
All right. Kelly, you had some more comments.
I was just going to respond real briefly to the question about road funding. So again, it's not typical. You won't typically see counties spending this funding on roads because it's not one of the allowable categories. We do have some discretion over our lost revenue funding that I would be willing to consider. We have some flexibility in the policy, our policy 509, to the extent that there are some of the road fixes or road improvements where the policy says the county would contribute less than 50%. And so that could be, if the board chose to, waive and increase our proportion, if there were dollars to leverage. Also, for example, primary roads, maybe this would provide some money for the road department to do some primary work over and above what we could afford in the budget without this additional funding.
Yep. All right, everybody, it's been a long morning. We appreciate your time. Everybody have a safe and fruitful holiday weekend. Make sure you stop and observe the real cause of Memorial Day and be safe. This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks, everyone.
Be careful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Good holiday. Thank you.
Thank you.